Chapter 1032. Of course I won't accept your methods. Wildflower's saber soul said. Methods? The way of killing is to use one's own methods to attack the enemy's weaknesses. If I lose to you, can I blame you for being too strong and unwilling to compete with me? Li Qingshan retorted. Wildflower's saber soul was speechless and suddenly waved her hand. Forget it. A win is a win, a loss is a loss. I was too petty. But I advise you to put me on the Azura sacrificial altar. Otherwise, bear the consequences. Finished speaking, she jumped into the saber and disappeared. Li Qingshan let out a sigh of relief. This kind of spiritual weapon was really not easy to deal with. But no matter what she said, she could not hand over the duck in her hands. She was about to prepare to refine it. Your Majesty, be careful. This end wildflower is a famous ominous blade of the Azura path. Azuras who use this blade will either be killed or die from madness. They will definitely reach the end. Yin Qing warned. End wildflower. This name is too uncreative. I think it's better to call it Tiger Fong too. Li Qingshan said proudly. Yin Qing felt helpless. You only care about the name? Tiger Fong too. With this lousy name, don't even think about refining me. Wildflower's saber's soul roared angrily. Heh, that's not up to you. Li Qingshan pressed down on the hilt of the blade and channeled his soul sense into it. The scenery before him suddenly changed. In a vast, boundless space, countless resplendent flowers bloomed and withered. At a closer glance, they were all condensed from flashes of the blade, possessing the endless variations of the blade. Wildflower's saber soul stood among the thousands of flowers. You really came. You can't use your brute force here. Her warning wasn't a kind advice, but rather a malicious provocation. She wanted to take revenge here and wipe out her grudge. So what if I came? Li Qingshan tried to retract his divine sense. He was actually firmly locked in this void, but he was still calm. Kid, if you kneel and beg for mercy now, I can still let you be my saber slave. Otherwise, your soul will be destroyed. Frenzied Flower's saber soul's maniacal laughter rang out from all directions, echoing throughout the void. Cut the crap and continue. Before Li Qingshan could finish his sentence, the saber aura surged towards him. He punched out, and the saber aura that filled the sky suddenly condensed into a frenzied flower saber. It was held in the frenzied flower saber soul's hand, and it slashed down. Li Qingshan's eyes widened. He was unable to use words to describe the profoundness of this strike. It was impossible to dodge or defend against. Li Qingshan's spiritual force was shattered by the saber, and his mind was damaged. However, the frenzied flower saber soul was not willing to give up. A wave of saber intent rushed into Li Qingshan's consciousness and transformed into the frenzied flower saber soul's figure. The frenzied flower saber soul said proudly, "Become my saber slave or die." Great saber technique, Li Qingshan praised. The strength of the wildflower saber soul's saber technique was simply unimaginable. It was worthy of being a famous saber in the Azura realm. In comparison, the set of saber techniques that he had comprehended was as crude as chopping firewood and slaughtering pigs. As it turned out, this was the terrifying aspect of the frenzied flower saber soul. Unlike the outside world, this was a battle of wills. Various abilities and techniques were difficult to use here. However, in this space of saber intent, the frenzied flower saber soul could unleash her saber techniques to the limit without any restrictions. Even the Azura King would not be able to defeat her here. However, once the refinement failed, she would take advantage of the situation and attack his sea of consciousness. If he was careless, he would instead be refined by her, turning into a so-called saber slaves. Tiger Fong too, you sure talk a lot. Li Qingshan smiled. Die. The frenzied flower saber soul turned into a streak of light and rampaged through his sea of consciousness, about to turn the world upside down. Spirit turtle suppresses the seas. Li Qingshan closed his eyes, and a spirit turtle appeared in the depths of his sea of consciousness. It shone with a faint light, filling his entire sea of consciousness in the blink of an eye. The streak of light seemed to sink into mud, becoming sluggish and dim. It was suppressed very soon. The frenzied flower saber soul was astounded. Just how many techniques did he possess? Who says I only have brute force? Li Qingshan used the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression, and the figure of a spirit turtle appeared around him. Faint light enveloped the frenzied flower saber soul, seeping into it strand by strand. Li Qingshan stood on the spirit turtle and appeared in the space of saber intent again. He wanted to directly suppress the frenzied flower saber soul. Don't even think about it. The frenzied flower saber soul bellowed. Thousands of flowers bloomed in the space of saber intent, mincing Li Qingshan and the spirit turtle to pieces together. The sharp streak of light pierced through the light. Suppress. Li Qingshan's eyes were calm. The figure of the spirit turtle became more and more tangible. Just like that, it was a battle of attrition. Neither of them could do anything to the other. In the end, it was still Li Qingshan who became exhausted first. If his mind continued to be damaged, it would be an extremely great burden on him. All he could do was temporarily give up on refining it. In terms of willpower alone, the frenzied flower saber soul was much more powerful than Li Qingshan. The greatest advantage of a weapon was that it could never be defeated. It was always in the hands of the victor. Through the endless battles of the Azura realm, it had accumulated countless victories and devoured countless blade slaves. Only then did it create the space of saber intent. However, a weapon was still a weapon at the end of the day. Willpower could not be directly converted into strength. Blade techniques and saber intent were both restricted by power. Not only was it the enemy's power, but it was also one's own power. Even if they fought 100 more times, Li Qingshan was confident that he could restrain her. As a result, as long as he did not attempt to refine it, the frenzied flower saber soul could do nothing to him. He was basically undefeatable. However, if that was the case, the weapon he had obtained after so much difficulty would be completely useless. He would have to be on guard against her attacks at all times. Li Qingshan was very impatient. He stepped on the blade and shouted, "If you dare to resist, I will break you and turn you into a pile of scrap metal." The frenzied flower saber soul let out a cold snort of disdain. It was unknown whether she had predicted that Li Qingshan would not do so, or whether there was no such thing as fear. She was formed from pure saber intent. Among the countless Azuras she had experienced, none were afraid of death. At most, I won't change your name. Just obediently refine it for me. Li Qingshan's threats did not work, so he tried to appease her. Are you begging me? The frenzied flower saber soul asked. I'm begging you. Li Qingshan cursed. He dragged the frenzied flower saber to the Azura sacrificial altar. He was considering changing to another weapon, but he was reluctant to do so. The void of saber intent was the biggest obstacle to him refining the frenzied flower saber soul, but at the same time, it was also a rich treasure that could allow his saber art to rapidly improve. While he was hesitating, the frenzied flower saber soul said, "Unless you change to a trash weapon, no weapon soul will submit to the weak." The weak that subdues you? I advise you not to provoke me anymore. When my temper flares up, I don't care about the pros and cons. Even if I can't refine you, I can seal you and even destroy you. Li Qingshan's tone was cold. It just so happens that I don't want to go back to the soldier's armory to eat dust. I can give you a chance. Not only will you refine me, but I will also teach you saber art and make you stronger. Why did you suddenly change your mind? Li Qingshan asked. Chapter 1033. Is that so? Li Qingshan pondered for a moment, thinking of Yin Qing's words. Azura who used the last ending frenzy blade would either be killed or die of madness. It wasn't strange for them to be killed. The Azura path was a place where you kill me and I kill you, but dying of madness was intriguing. There were many Azura path powerhouses, and it was impossible for anyone to not be able to refine the last ending frenzy blade. However, after refining it, none of them had a good ending. What caused them to go crazy? Are you afraid? Frenzy Blade provoked. A little, Li Qingshan said honestly. Frenzy Blade was startled. She didn't expect Li Qingshan to answer like that. But you're definitely not the guy I'm most afraid of. Li Qingshan laughed aloud. His soul sense penetrated the void of blade intent. This time, the wildflower blade's soul did not put up any more resistance. He still allowed him to leave his imprint on the blade, successfully refining the dying wildflower blade. Li Qingshan raised the last ending frenzy blade. The tip of the blade flashed, and he casually swung the blade. The blade light flashed, and 10 miles away, a mountain split open and collapsed. Good blade. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. The last ending frenzy blade's destructive power was far above Tiger's Fang. If he used Tiger's Fang, he could only swing it after sucking enough blood. However, the last ending frenzy blade only needed a casual swing to achieve the same effect. If he faced the Dragon King of the Sea again, he wouldn't have to worry about only having 3 moves. Of course. But your blade art is too weak. You're just randomly swinging. Frenzy Blade mocked Li Qingshan's blade art again. She was indeed qualified to do so. This was Li Qingshan's only regret. He didn't truly subdue Frenzy Blade and only formed a cooperative relationship of equals, so he couldn't inherit the profoundness of the blade art. However, he believed that as his cultivation increased, he would one day be able to completely subdue Frenzy Blade and become the true Frenzy Blade master. Do you want to learn? I can teach you. Frenzy Blade said. Sure. Naturally, Li Qingshan could tell that he was up to no good, and the frenzied flower sword soul did not seem to have any intention of hiding it. I have 2 teaching methods. One is fast and the other is slow. Which one do you want to learn? How fast can it be if it's fast, and how slow can it be if it's slow? Send your spiritual will into the saber. I will spar with you and teach you step by step. This is slow. There's no need to say anything. I'll choose the slow one. Slow work yields fine work. But sometimes I'm in a good mood, and sometimes I'm in a bad mood. Even if I scold you, you'll have to accept it obediently. Alright, cut the crap. How do you want to teach me? Li Qingshan wasn't someone who couldn't tolerate a few curses, but based on the frenzied flower blade's attitude towards him, he probably wouldn't be able to learn it even after 100 years. Then choose the fast one. I can guarantee that you will be able to obtain the essence of saber intent without any impurities. Furthermore, this is the strongest move of the last frenzied flower saber. It can instantly increase your battle prowess and allow you to kill strong enemies. There's such a good thing. What's the name of this move? Li Qingshan smiled. End of the fanatic. How auspicious. Heading to the end of the road after going berserk? Li Qingshan shook his head with a smile. As expected of the Azura realm's saber. This trap wasn't hidden at all, and it even told him clearly that jumping in would mean death. Exactly. If you want great power and a powerful saber technique, how can you not take some risks? The frenzied flower blade said maliciously. Let me think. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and his mind became as calm as the ocean. He got the spirit turtle to divine for good or ill luck, but the results surprised him slightly. If you refuse, you better send me back to the armory obediently. I will never fight for you. I can accept a weakling, but I won't accept a coward. I can accept it, but I have a condition. What condition? If I don't end up as you wish, you have to follow my orders and fight for me. You can't cause trouble. I respect the brave, but I respect the strong even more. None of the sword masters of the end of the frenzied flower blade died because of my interference, the frenzied flower blade said. Li Qingshan opened his eyes and smiled, then come and try. Alright, hold the hilt tightly and relax your mind. The frenzied flower blade's figure appeared once again. It was semi-transparent and existed between illusion and reality. It overlapped with Li Qingshan's body and held the hilt tightly. Li Qingshan took a deep breath and relaxed his mind. Suddenly, the end of the frenzied flower blade let out a strange hum. A ripple swept through his sea of consciousness, and his soul trembled as well. The man and the blade gradually formed a strange resonance. The sea of consciousness and the blade intent slowly overlapped. Vaguely, Li Qingshan saw the past swordmasters of the frenzied flower blade. They wielded the end of the frenzied flower blade and fought against powerful enemies, unleashing a myriad of profound blade techniques. He was overjoyed. This was the blade intent inheritance he wanted. It's too early to celebrate. The best is yet to come. The frenzied flower blade's lips curled into a smile. One with the blade, end of the fanatic. The frenzied flower blade suddenly blossomed. Layers of beautiful petals wrapped around Li Qingshan's hands. Complicated patterns spread along his arms and instantly covered his entire body. It was exactly the same as the patterns on the blade. His skin also glowed with a metallic luster. It was as if he had become a part of the blade. Li Qingshan's heart shook. He felt as if he had overlapped with the past swordmasters of the frenzied flower blade. His sea of consciousness turned into a blade intent void. A strong sense of confidence welled up in him. I can also use this blade technique. The end of the frenzied flower blade was no longer difficult to control. He understood every curve and every inch of its patterns. The blade slowly spun according to his mind, creating afterimages. It looked as if he was casually waving it. Only when this scene was magnified 1,000 times could one see that the countless floating dust particles in the air were being sliced apart by the blade. Chopping a mountain was easy, but chopping dust was difficult. The former only required strength, while the latter required the blade technique to be at the finest detail. How is it? Did I become stronger? But it's still nowhere near enough. I'll completely unleash your potential. The frenzied flower blade's soul laughed maniacally. Almost all the Azuras who had died from going berserk had died under this move. Indeed, she was not hindering the battle at all. Instead, she was helping the battle. However, after this hysterical dance, she would definitely meet her end. Sure, Li Qingshan said. The frenzied flower blade's laughter halted. How is that possible? What's impossible about it? Li Qingshan smiled. Merging his sea of consciousness with the blade intent void did indeed place a great mental burden on him. The frenzied killing intent left behind by the past swordmasters was enough to drive Azura kings mad. His killing intent skyrocketed as well, and his expression became extremely vicious. However, his scarlet eyes remained clear and deep. The reason why he was surprised by the spirit turtle's divination was that there was no danger at all. Why aren't you mad? The frenzied flower blade asked in surprise. Chapter 1034. Tiger Demon refines Bone Heart Frenzy. This was a state that Li Qingshan had grown accustomed to. From the day he began cultivating until today, when the bloodline of the Tiger Demon had become so dense, even when he used the Tiger Demon's fury, he had never lost his rationality or become crazy. Although the fanatic's end gave him a different feeling from the Tiger Demon's fury, it wasn't enough to make him go crazy and die. This move's stimulation of power isn't particularly remarkable. It can barely be compared to Battle Demon's possession, but it's not as good as Tiger Demon's fury. However, in terms of increasing combat power, it's probably much better than Battle Demon's possession. It makes up for my biggest flaw. As Li Qingshan pondered, he focused on comprehending the blade intent. However, it didn't take long before he felt a deep exhaustion. Thus, ignoring the pull of the frenzied blade soul, he forcefully separated himself from the blade intent void. The patterns on his body returned to the last lunatic blade, and the metallic luster on his skin also dimmed. In that instant, an intense feeling of emptiness drowned him. He could no longer grasp the profound and ever-changing blade technique. As for the last lunatic blade in his hand, he had also lost the feeling of becoming one with the blade and wielding it as he wished. He couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. However, just like how after the tide receded, many traces and remnants would be left on the beach, he had also comprehended a sliver of blade intent, enough to further improve his blade technique. He revealed a smile. The frenzied blade's soul had not lied to him. This was indeed the fastest way to learn blade techniques. As long as he continued to become one with the blade and fuse with the blade intent void, his blade technique would very quickly enter a whole new realm. He lightly flicked the blade. What else do you have to say? It seems that you didn't completely rely on deceptive tricks to obtain me from the armory. Since you've passed the test, I'll fight for you. After the frenzied blade's soul failed 3 times in a row to kill Li Qingshan, it seemed to have finally given up on this plan. Li Qingshan let go of the blade hilt and lay on the ground. This kind of mental confrontation was even more tiring than a great battle. In a short while, he fell into a deep sleep. The last wildflower blade was stabbed into the ground beside him, The blade was only a few feet away from his body, and he looked like he was defenseless. The light on the blade was like a shining eye, staring at him. In the void of boundless saber intent, the wildflower saber's soul muttered to himself, "What a strange fellow. His hostility is even heavier than the Azura King's, but his temperament isn't affected at all. It's precisely because of this that he's able to maintain his calmness even when he's at the end of his road of madness. However, if you're in a fierce battle of life and death, would you still be so calm?" Fellow Taoist unraging, where's Li Qingshan? Get him out here right now. Yu Weiyang was furious. Anyone would be furious if they had been stood up, let alone for over half a year. Just how many years had it been since he had been fooled like this? In order to deal with the soaring Locust King, he had come up with a meticulous plan. He had even contacted the King Chu's estate, but the main character of the plan, Li Qingshan, had never appeared. He said he had returned to the Chan monastery of Devanaga to learn cultivation methods before vanishing. He had sent people to urge him several times, but all he received was that Li Qingshan was in secluded cultivation in the Demon Suppression Hall. The soaring Locust King continued to wreak havoc in the Green Province. Although its activity had weakened drastically, that was mainly because the various cities and villages had all been devoured clean, so it did not have enough food to replenish its clones. Cultivation methods and prefectural cities were far too risky, so it actively reduced its activity. As for the blow from the King Chu's estate, it was actually secondary. As long as the locust plague continued, regular people would not be able to recuperate normally, and the foundation of the Green Province's cultivation community would be on the verge of collapse. "Please calm down, Great General. He's in there." The unraging monk pointed at the Azura field beside him. "Isn't he cultivating in the Demon Suppression Hall?" Yu Weiyang questioned. "He went back in there after he came out," said the unraging monk. "Make him come out. Does he really think he can do whatever he wants just because he's undergone the third heavenly tribulation?" Yu Weiyang said. "This is his arcane treasure. Even I can't open it." The unraging monk laid out his hands. "If you won't open it, then I'll open it." Yu Weiyang was truly angered this time. He extended his hand towards the Azura field. He did not move at all, but once he did, it was like a bolt of lightning. "That's no good." The unraging monk pressed down on the Azura field with his plump, fan-like hand. "Unraging monk, this matter is extremely important. As an eminent monk of Buddhism, are you just going to watch as the people are plunged into misery and suffering?" Yu Weiyang asked. "This is the fate of the Green Province. How can we place all our hopes on a single person?" The unraging monk shook his head. "Who's calling me?" At this moment, Li Qingshan's voice rang out from the Azura field. Soon afterwards, Li Qingshan leapt out of the Azura field with his Dying Blossom's blade on his back. He seemed to be in high spirits after a good night's sleep. Yu Weiyang was about to fly into a rage as soon as he saw Li Qingshan, but his eyes were attracted by the blade on his back. It was not only because of the huge and ostentatious appearance of the Dying Blossom's blade, but also because of its unique charm. Just like fine wine was to a drunkard and a famous painting was to a painter, as a disciple of the school of the military, Yu Weiyang had an instinctive sense for the quality of a weapon. He could feel the pulse of life in the cold blade. Could this be an Azura divine weapon? "What are you looking at?" A provocative voice rang out, but it did not come from Li Qingshan. Instead, it was the Dying Blossom's blade, pointing straight at Yu Weiyang with cold killing intent. A weapon soul. Yu Weiyang was greatly surprised. It was actually an Azura weapon with a weapon soul. How did the kid get it? How could he control it? "You're still looking? Do you believe me when I say I'll cut you in half?" The soul of the Dying Blossom's blade continued to hoot. He said to Li Qingshan eagerly, "This guy's not bad. I'll use him as a sacrifice to the blade. And the fatty beside him counts as one too." The unraging monk was taken aback too. His eyes widened. He had never seen such an arrogant weapon before. Even the most spiritual Buddhist treasure of the Chan monastery of Devanaga paled in comparison. "There's no need to look. I'm talking to you. I can use your fat to maintain the blade. Come at me together." "Shut your mouth." Li Qingshan could not take it anymore. He slapped the hilt of the blade hard. Originally, he did not want to carry the Dying Blossom's blade on his back, but the soul of the Dying Blossom's blade said to him, "If you want to comprehend blade intent sooner and unleash the full power of the Dying Blossom's blade, you better carry me obediently." "Oh my? Do you really think you're my master now? With your puny strength, I've already shown you enough respect by fighting for you. Kid, don't push your luck. I want to return to the Azura realm. This world is too boring. I can't even kill whenever I want. It's boring at all." Why would the soul of the Dying Blossom's blade listen to Li Qingshan? She chattered away as the blade thrummed. The reason why Li Qingshan was able to refine the Dying Blossom's blade was because she possessed killing intent and took the initiative to cooperate with him, establishing a cooperative relationship of equals. Although she no longer tried to force Li Qingshan to his death, since they were on equal terms, he could forget about what she had to say. "Damn, disciple, this blade sure suits you well." The unraging monk watched on in interest and chuckled. "Really? You've got a nasty mouth. Damn, fatty, I dare you to fucking say that again." Before Li Qingshan could even reply, the soul of the Dying Blossom's blade began to roar. Li Qingshan felt like spittle had been sprayed across his face. The soul of the Dying Blossom's blade was still rather cool and elegant earlier, but now, it was completely a patient with a nasty mouth and an aggressive personality. He finally understood why the previous swordmasters had died from going mad. With this blade on his back, he basically spent every single moment taunting them. Even if he did not get killed by the enemy, he would still be driven mad by the noise. He shoved the Dying Blossom's blade into the Azura field and secretly made up his mind. There would be a day when she would completely refine it and rename the Dying Blossom's blade as Tiger Fong 2. "Fellow you, long time no see. It's my fault for not disciplining her properly. I've made a fool of myself. Oh right, did you come specifically for me?" Li Qingshan had basically forgotten about the great General King's plan. "Of course I've come for you." Yu Yang widened his eyes and said furiously, "Don't tell me you've already forgotten." Why would I? I'm really sorry about that. Many things happened during my cultivation this time, so I really had no choice. Let's set off right now," Li Qingshan said. "There's no hurry. Where did you get this Azura armament from? I've never heard of a blade like this in the 9 provinces." Yu Wuyang changed the topic. He also temporarily cast aside the situation of the Green Province and the destruction of the people. He asked the question that concerned him the most. "I used many demonic armaments to exchange for it on the Azura altar of armaments." Li Qingshan shrugged and did not hide anything. Chapter 1035. It was no wonder that Yu Wuyang was so surprised. The Azura field was used to communicate with the Azura realm, while the Azura altar of armaments was a step further, directly communicating with the armaments vault of the Azura realm. The Azura realm was boundless, so communicating with it was relatively easy, but it also came at a great price. However, the armaments vault was the holy land of the Azura realm. It was basically extremely difficult for humans other than Azura to communicate with it. "I do," Li Qingshan said matter-of-factly. Since the existence of the Azura field was already known to the world, there was no need for him to hide the Azura altar of armaments. He had obtained it far too easily, so he did not find it particularly precious. "Where did you get it from?" Yu Wuyang took a step forward. He was rather excited, but he also found it rather hard to believe. "Someone gave it to me," said Li Qingshan. "A gift?" Yu Wuyang frowned. He did not believe it at all. Who would give a treasure like that away so easily? That day, I had just fought a great battle with someone when a voice suddenly rang out above me. It said something like, "Natural warrior, come to the Azura realm for an endless, bloody battle." I wanted to go, but I still turned it down after some thought. I said I'll unify the Azura realm in the future. Afterwards, he tossed down the stone disc from the blood-red swirl. Only afterwards did I find out it's called the Azura altar of armaments. Li Qingshan explained calmly. "You're saying you've been inspired by the Azura realm?" Yu Wuyang was shocked. Compared to the unraging monk, his understanding of the Azura realm was much deeper, and he viewed the Azura realm as the final promised land. If that's the Azura realm's call, Li Qingshan laid out his hands. And after you turned it down, you received an Azura altar of armaments. Don't you dare lie. Only the souls of those who have died in battle will be summoned by the Azura realm. As for unifying the Azura realm, that was utter nonsense. It was not even worth mentioning. I'm probably just a little more cocky. Li Qingshan shrugged. He could not be bothered to explain any further. It was up to him whether he believed it or not. Can I take a look at the Azura altar of armaments? Yu Yang decided to ignore Li Qingshan's nonsense for now. He wanted to take a look at the legendary Azura altar of armaments first. Up to you. With a thought from Li Qingshan, a blood-colored whirlpool appeared in the Shuraba field. Yu Yang couldn't wait to step into it, and a blade light whizzed toward him. It turned out to be the frenzied flower blade souls. Great saber technique, Yu Yang praised. He waved his hand and took out a long spear, donned a treasured armor, and started fighting with the frenzied flower saber soul. In an instant, saber lights flashed and spears danced chaotically, and the sound of weapons colliding resounded like thunder. Fellow Taoist Yu, I've come to collect this saber. Li Qingshan's voice came from outside the Azura field. There's no need for that. I'm going to try out this soldier soul. Yu Yang said. In the blink of an eye, he could feel that the berserk flower blade soul's bladesmanship was extraordinary, and his martial arts skills were even vaguely above his own. He could not help but feel excited. Li Qingshan, don't meddle in other people's business. Frenzied flower sword soul also shouted. She had been subdued by Li Qingshan using brute force. She was suppressing her anger and wanted to use this opportunity to vent it out. All right. Sand and pebbles were flying in the Azura field. Murderous intent soared into the sky, and the blood-colored vortex in the sky spun rapidly. The frenzied flower sword soul became more and more courageous as the battle went on. Even though it could not fully display its bladesmanship in the real world like it could in the Blade Void, Yu Yang was still more and more shocked. As a disciple of the military school, he had been cultivating diligently for thousands of years, and he was confident that his martial arts skills were no worse than those of ordinary Azura kings. However, in front of the frenzied flower sword soul, he was being suppressed. The legend is indeed true. Every soldier soul in the Azura path has been tempered thousands of times. They have gone through countless battles, and their martial arts skills have reached the pinnacle. If I can get one, it's like I've found a famous teacher. Yu Yang's heart was burning with eagerness. But the biggest problem now was how to defeat this soldier soul. The frenzied flower sword soul was even more powerful than when he first emerged from the Azura altar of armaments. After Li Qingshan refined the end of the wild flower blade, a connection naturally formed between them. It could draw power from Li Qingshan, which was equivalent to dispelling the frenzied flower sword soul's greatest worry. Li Qingshan could turn down the frenzied flower sword soul, but the last thing he lacked was a sense of mischief. He proactively provided power to the frenzied flower sword soul, as well as resources for the Azura field's advancement. Alright kid, you're still rather useful. You're not siding with an outsider. The frenzied flower sword soul communicated with him, but he sighed inside. Weapons were created to be used at the end of the day. A blade with a master was still better than a blade without a master. This kid was a little weak, but his potential was extraordinary. He was worth training. Li Qingshan snickered. The unraging monk was very curious. He asked, "What are you laughing at?" Li Qingshan waved his hand, and a swath of blood-red light projected the intense battle in the Azura field. The unraging monk was shocked as well. Among the 100 schools of thought, the school of the military was the most skilled at fighting and killing. Yu Yang really had lived up to his title as the Great General King, displaying a set of startling techniques. However, he had actually been suppressed by a mere blade, so how could they not be surprised? The frenzied flower sword's soul fought to its heart's content, directly merging into the end of the wild flower blade. A streak of light shot through the air. Its body was the toughest blade, without any so-called vital points or weak points. It was even more difficult to deal with than the Azura King. On the other hand, Yu Yang's treasured armor was already in tatters, and he was covered in wounds. Although he had avoided any vital points and was not injured at all, he still seemed to be in an extremely horrible shape. Just how did you subdue this blade? The unraging monk asked in surprise. Even he was not confident he could subdue this blade. Charm? Li Qingshan smiled. I think we're birds of a feather. You better put the blade away quickly. Don't embarrass the great General King too much, the unraging monk tried to persuade him. If I do that, doesn't that mean a mighty great General King can't even defeat a blade? Li Qingshan said. This old bastard is always trying to show off in front of me. I wonder what his expression will be like if he loses. The unraging monk obviously did not believe Li Qingshan's reasoning, but given the current situation, it was really inappropriate for him to interfere. Suddenly, the blade of light swept past Yu Weiyang like a streak of light, leaving behind a bloody mark on his face. He had slowed down slightly because of the blade of greed. Don't even think about leaving. Yu Weiyang's eyes shone brightly. He hooked the blade with his dagger axe and spread his fingers, grabbing the hilt. He was about to suppress the end of the wildflower blade. You're asking for it? Do you think my blade is that easy to take? Li Qingshan was mentally connected to the wildflower blade soul, so he could clearly sense that she was doing this on purpose. She was laying down a trap. Yu Weiyang had no other choice. He definitely did not possess the power to stop the end of the wildflower blade. If he wanted to emerge victorious, the only way was to directly attack the blade soul. However, little did he know that while the wildflower blade soul only possessed a soul, it was condensed from pure blade intent. It was even more powerful than the blade itself. Sure enough, Yu Weiyang's expression changed. He paused, and he became riddled with openings. The wildflower blade's soul suddenly appeared, snatching the end of the wildflower blade and swinging it at Yu Weiyang. It laughed madly. Chapter 1036. Oh no, if the blossoming blade's soul really cleaved Yu Weiyang to death, then we'd be done for. Li Qingshan was about to stop him, but Yu Weiyang roared out. With him at the center, a ring-shaped wave of air swept out for hundreds of kilometers, knocking the end of the wildflower blade away. Yu Weiyang's eyes were blood-red. His muscles bulged and his wounds rapidly healed. He was like a true Azura king. He entered an explosive state similar to the tiger demon's fury, lunging towards the end of the wildflower blade. He moved several times faster than just now, swinging his dagger rapidly. A sharp stream of energy shot out like a bolt of lightning, destroying everything in its path. It's finally getting a little interesting, the blossoming blade's soul smiled. Right when he was about to swing his blade to receive the attack, he suddenly vanished. Fellow Yu, I think we should stop here. Li Qingshan extended his hand and fished the end of the wildflower blade back from the Azura field. The blossoming blade's soul roared furiously, Li Qingshan, I've warned you before. Mind your own business. You can't kill him, Li Qingshan said firmly. Nonsense. The end of the wildflower blade trembled violently. Don't look down on him. He can't defeat you, but can't he run? Li Qingshan said. Shut up. Where can he run off to in the Azura field? I never said I'd help you trap him. You traitorous bastard. Shut up, you bitch. This is your battle, not mine. The unraging monk sweated profusely from the side as he listened on. He was even more shocked by the power of the end of the wildflower blade. With a blade in hand, even mortals could kill great cultivators. Just how powerful would it be in Li Qingshan's hands? Yu Weiyang's chest heaved up and down a few times before his eyes returned to normal. The impact of this battle was not small. He was almost defeated by a saber, but it also aroused the desire in his heart. If he could get his hands on such a weapon, his strength would undergo an earth-shattering change. He flashed to the Azura sacrificial altar and stared at the mottled stone platform with sparkling eyes. After a while, Yu Weiyang walked out of the Shura field. He had already tidied up his clothes and said seriously, Fellow cultivator Li, please lend me the Shura sacrificial altar. He completely acknowledged Li Qingshan's strength and no longer treated him as a junior. Chain Mountain Range, Qing Zhao's Caves. The 33 skull prayer beads spun and flew around, constantly changing their formation. They maintained the skull demonic formation, stirring up strong gales in the belly of the mountain. Little Anne's white monk robes fluttered in the wind. She waved her hand, and the skulls turned into prayer beads. They formed a string and returned to her wrist. She sank into her thoughts for a while, and her body suddenly shone with a faint, golden light. She was dignified, enough for people to feel deep veneration at first glance. She raised her hand with the skull prayer beads, and light gathered on it, coating the white prayer beads with a faint layer of gold. It no longer seemed evil at all, like a supreme treasure of Buddhism. As soon as she stepped out of the dwelling, mist swirled through the mountains, and it rained continuously. The mountains became verdant again. "You've been hiding for so long. It must have been hard on you. Come out." Little Anne's clear voice echoed through the mountains. A hoarse, cruel voice rang out. "I heard you're Li Qingshan's partner and the most outstanding disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga?" Little Anne leapt onto the top of a mountain and drew the trouble-severing blade with a backhand, raising it high into the air. "Trouble-severing," the voice said in surprise. "Trouble-severing," Little Anne repeated calmly. "Where did you get this blade from?" The clouds and mist suddenly parted, and a locust the size of a huge ship swooped down from the sky. The sound of its wings was deafening, kicking up a shrill gust of wind. Boom! The mountain beneath Xiao An's feet collapsed, and huge rocks flew in all directions. She had already arrived at another mountain peak. The flying locust demon commander's huge compound eyes reflected countless figures of Little Anne. He was filled with surprise and doubt. Her strength had exceeded his expectations, but what Little Anne said next left him with no time to think about this. "Do you want to know the location of the Golden Cicada Spirit King?" The Golden Cicada Spirit King. The soaring locust king ground his teeth. During the countless days and nights in the demon suppression hall, he had been thinking about how to get revenge, but there was no other form of hatred that was deeper and more pressing than this. "The Golden Cicada Spirit King," Little Anne repeated calmly once again. "Tell me exactly where he is. I can spare your life." The soaring locust king said, "He's right here in the Rui Commandery, and he's about to ascend soon. If you want to stop him, you better be prepared." Little Anne said emotionlessly. "Where in the Rui Commandery?" the soaring locust king asked. The Rui Commandery spanned tens of thousands of kilometers, so finding a hidden great demon king was like finding a needle in a haystack. "You'll understand when the heavenly tribulation descends," Little Anne said. "I want you to explain it to me right now." The soaring locust king roared and charged towards Little Anne again. Little Anne stood at the top of the mountain and opened her mouth slightly. The mountains were suddenly illuminated by Buddhist light, and the cry of a dragon pierced through the surroundings. "Monk King!" The flying locust demon commander cried out in surprise. The colossal flying locust demon commander was torn to pieces within the dragon's cry, while a strand of samadhi flames of white bone swept and retracted within the dazzling light, collecting the resources. The light gradually dimmed, and the clouds and mist in the mountains gathered together. "I don't need you to spare me." Little Anne sheathed his blade and took off into the air. A few mountains away, Ru Exine emerged from her dwelling with a vicious plague ghost beside her. She rubbed her chin in thought for a while before smiling and following closely behind him, flying into the clouds. On the lake of dragons and snakes, on a barren island so small that it basically could not be regarded as an island, the disciples of the 100 schools of thought all avoided the island from afar. It was not only because this was where the White Wolf commander cultivated, but also because of the terrifying hiss that rang out from time to time. Regardless of whether it was day or night, whether it was winter or summer, it seemed to come from the depths of hell, occupying everyone's hearts. A few months ago, a disciple of legalism had wanted to approach this island, hoping to obtain a fortuitous encounter from this legalist senior. However, before he had even stepped onto the island, he had returned to his dwelling with a pale face. Very soon he had gone mad and died. Since then he had never dared to approach this place again. At this moment, the hiss rang out once again. In the center of the verdant island, a naked woman knelt on the ground. Beautiful little snakes coiled around her body, swimming around her skin. Occasionally, they would raise their heads from her skin and spit out their green tongues. Her originally beautiful face was currently contorted due to pain. Her eyes were filled with hatred, making her appear even uglier. She was like an evil spirit that had sunk into the depths of hell. Suddenly, the hell snakes became agitated. They raised their heads and looked in the same direction, filled with hostility. Qian Rongji raised her head and saw a figure walking towards her. His footsteps were light and silent, as if he was riding on the wind. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and she could not help but hold her breath. As the figure approached, the hell snakes calmed down and dove into her skin. They intertwined to form a strange and beautiful tattoo. Chapter 1037. Qian Rongji opened her mouth, but it was as if she had lost her ability to speak. She made a hollow and meaningless sound, like the hiss of a snake. A minuscule pain pierced her heart, but it was even more unbearable than the snakes coiling around her. She almost couldn't help but curl up. Little and sighed softly and took out a set of clothes to drape over her. "You've changed?" Qian Rongji's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. In her memories, she had always gazed at everything with clear and empty eyes, without love or hate, without sorrow or joy. She would never act like this. A wave of anger suddenly surged in her heart. These 3 words seemed to be a question. "Then what exactly is our original appearance?" Little and asked in response. "Thank you for coming to see me. I've already seen you. You can go to Li Qingshan's side." Qian Rongji lowered her head, feeling an indescribable disappointment. The wind blew across the island, and the grass rustled. Clang. Little and pulled out the trouble-severing blade and raised it high. "You once crossed me. Let me cross you once too." Qian Rongji suddenly raised her head, and the snakes all over her body hissed in warning. She suddenly laughed and closed her eyes. "All right." The blade flashed like snow and lightning, bright and clean, disappearing in a flash. After a long time, Qian Rongji slowly opened her eyes. She found that she was still alive, and there were no wounds on her body. However, the blade mark was left on her heart, as if it had cut and torn something. Those memories that she had abandoned long ago resurfaced in her mind, and she finally understood what it was that was still hurting her. Even though she had already twisted, crushed, and obliterated the past, some things had instead been tempered and solidified. Like a grain of golden sand. Since she had to associate with the snakes, she should transform into a snake. Only then could she treat this hell as normal, even a paradise. Otherwise, she could only continue to endure the pain of this hell. This was the source of her troubles, and the trouble-severing blade could not cut it away. This was because it was not just the memories of the past, but also all the beautiful hopes of humanity, wishing for happiness, wishing for peace. This was compared to all the greed, anger, and obsession of humanity. It had to be even more deeply rooted. Therefore, gods and Buddhas were high up in the 9 heavens. She looked up at the sky with a blank expression and muttered to herself, "What exactly is our original appearance?" No one answered. Only the sound of the wind was heard. The Chan Monastery of Devanaga in front of Demon Suppression Hall. Yu Weiyang looked at Li Qingshan earnestly. Li Qingshan had no reason to refuse. He agreed. However, it's not easy to subdue this weapon spirit. If it's not handled properly, it could even be life-threatening. Li Qingshan had no doubt that Yu Weiyang could offer more weapons than him, and his own strength was not much weaker than him. At the very least, he wouldn't be able to confront the frenzied flower sword soul like this. He could only rely on his innate divine ability to suppress it. "I'll be careful. If there's any danger, please give me some pointers." Yu Weiyang's change in attitude was not unnatural at all. He was not an Azura yet, but he still followed the principle of respecting the strong. The fact that he could refine the end-frenzied blade proved that Li Qingshan's strength was definitely not as simple as his battle against Si Qing. The frenzied blade's spirit clearly did not submit to Li Qingshan, but no matter how he cursed, he never actually attacked him. This was already a rare form of recognition. Li Qingshan's slight displeasure towards Yu Weiyang vanished as a result. He was Han Qiongji's master after all, so he said modestly, "I wouldn't dare to say I'd give you any pointers. I just have some experience." "Let's go to the great general's estate first?" "All right. Hold on." The unraging monk suddenly grabbed Li Qingshan's shoulder. "What else is there?" Li Qingshan asked. Something good. The unraging monk chuckled. That doesn't sound like it. Why would your master harm you? Please wait a few days, fellow you. Come with me to Great Buddha Mountain first. You better hide your demon chi for now. The unraging monk grabbed Li Qingshan's shoulder and made his way up the mountain in a single step, arriving before the grand hall. The dauntless monk sat before the Buddha and said without even looking back, "You've emerged." His voice echoed through the vast, distant hall, accompanied by the curls of incense. It possessed its own sense of solemnity. The abbot was waiting for me? Li Qingshan was surprised. That's right. Why? Because you have a Buddhist nature. Li Qingshan burst out laughing. Only after receiving a vicious glare from the unraging monk did he stop laughing. Sorry. I couldn't help myself. What do you think I have? A Buddhist nature. Li Qingshan found it rather funny. Just recently, the dauntless monk was tempted to suppress him like a demon king, yet now he suddenly said he had some sort of Buddhist nature. The Buddha is in the heart, always present. Damn disciple, how dare you laugh again? As soon as the corner of Li Qingshan's lips curled up, he was scolded back by the unraging monk. He raised his hands. All right. I'll stop laughing. Though, how did you manage to tell, Abbot? I've already said it before. I don't cultivate good karma in my life. I only like killing and arson. Before he had even finished, the dauntless monk cut him off. That's a very Buddhist nature. If I remember correctly, it was because of that I was sent into the demon suppression hall back then. Li Qingshan shook his head. That had indeed come from a great monk. The monk's dharma name was Ji Shin. As for what Buddhist nature it was, he had no idea at all. He just found it extremely refreshing to talk about it. You entered the demon suppression hall, yet you practiced the demon suppression statuary. You practiced demonic arts, yet you didn't succumb to the demonic path, so you obviously have a Buddhist nature in your heart. I made an error in judgment back then. Instead, junior brother Unraging was able to discern a gem and accepted you as his disciple. The unraging monk laughed aloud. He also felt like he was being glorified. Now that you've said that, I suddenly feel like it's quite reasonable, but don't tell me you want me to become a monk again? Li Qingshan said cautiously. The Buddhist school is vast. You can come and go as you please. It won't force you. If you want to be a secular disciple, then be a secular disciple. That's not what you said back then. In order to prevent him from affecting little Anne's cultivation, the dauntless monk had wholeheartedly wanted him to lose all sense of self. Back then it was expediency. Now it's the Buddhist Dharma. All right then. You called me over just to tell me this? You might be a secular disciple, but you're also a disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga. You do have a Buddhist nature in your heart, but if you don't receive guidance, you'll be corrupted by demonic thoughts and become a true demon king in the end, which is why I've prepared a Dharma assembly for you. So, my head hurts when I hear about scriptures. As soon as Li Qingshan heard the word Dharma assembly, he was about to leave, but the unraging monk stopped him. Don't worry, you don't need to understand the scriptures. It can even enlighten your root of wisdom and spirituality. Not just anyone can enjoy a Dharma assembly of Dhyana. A Dharma assembly of Dhyana. Li Qingshan vaguely remembered that little and had once mentioned that during the time she cultivated in the Chan monastery of Devanaga, she had also gone through a Dharma assembly of Dhyana. It seemed like only the most outstanding disciples of the monastery could enjoy it. It was extremely beneficial to her cultivation of the path of white bone and great beauty. Its effects were rather similar to the fruit of wisdom, but Chan schools had their own realms of cultivation and comprehension. So this monk sees how he can't suppress me, so he wants to rope me in instead. However, he obviously would not turn down a free advantage like this. He clasped his hands. Then thank you for your kindness, Abbot. Chapter 1038. The bells on Great Buddha Mountain rang in unison, and a halo of Buddhist light rose up. Buddhas and bodhisattvas could be faintly seen within it. Celestial maiden Jia Lan danced in the air, and the sound of chanting could be heard from 1,000 miles away. The monks of the monastery all brought their palms together in the direction of the grand hall at the top of the mountain and chanted, Amitban. Zen Heart Dharma Assembly. I wonder which disciple has such good fortune? A middle-aged monk stopped sweeping the broom in his hand and asked enviously, Senior brother, there's no need to be envious. As long as we work hard in our cultivation, we'll also have such a day. The young monk beside him advised. Then he lowered his head and swept the fallen leaves, no longer paying attention to others. Sigh, it's not that easy. Just like how it took quite a lot of effort for the Banyan Tree King to condense a single fruit of wisdom, the monastery of Chan Monastery of Devanaga had to expend the power of belief that they had accumulated over 10,000 years each time they held a Dharma assembly. They were as careful as they could be with every single person they chose. Junior brother Qingshan is indeed not a demon king. In a Buddhist temple, one lamp opened his eyes and smiled. Then, he closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. In the center of the Mahavira Hall, under the gaze of the towering Buddha statue, Li Qingshan sat in an irregular posture. His hands were casually placed on his knees. His long black hair hung loosely, and there was a solemn aura on his bronze-colored face. Suddenly, the Buddha statue's slightly closed eyes seemed to open a little. Its thick golden lips spat out a mysterious Zen sound. In an instant, flowers fell from the sky and golden lotuses appeared on the ground. It seemed real yet illusory. The heavenly flower landed in his sea of consciousness, creating waves of ripples. As the ripples converged, many golden lotuses bloomed. Li Qingshan's posture gradually relaxed, and he simply sat cross-legged again. He supported his cheek with one hand, a thoughtful look on his face, as if he had comprehended something. Outside the grand hall, the dauntless monk's face eased up. He really does possess a Buddhist nature. If a demon king from the demon domain came to enjoy this meditation spell assembly, his will would definitely collapse, his demonic power would go out of control, and he would die on the spot. However, there was not a hint of struggle on his face. He accepted it calmly, which showed that he was not a demon king. Senior brother, you're still worried. The unraging monk smiled. If you were the abbot, you would be the abbot. You're worried too, said the dauntless monk. Time passed. As the sun set in the west, the sky gradually darkened. Only the light on Great Buddha Mountain grew brighter and brighter. All of them knelt down in the direction of the Great Buddha Mountain. He prostrated himself in worship. Suddenly, a streak of seven-colored light approached from afar, barging into the golden sky and landing in front of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. He turned into a monk with a ruddy complexion and high spirits. He wore a large red kasaya with golden threads and was adorned with jewels that emitted a strange light. He held a 9-ringed Buddhist staff in his hand, and as he walked, clanking sounds rang out. Welcome, Senior Brother Seven Treasures. Apologies for not going out to meet you. With a boom, the mountain gates swung open. The various doors on the mountain opened one after another, and the dauntless monk personally came out to receive them. He brought his palms together and bowed. Junior Brother Dauntless, ever since you succeeded as the abbot of the monastery, it's already been 130 years since we last met. The monk king of the Seven Treasures returned the gesture and smiled, but it vanished in a flash. Please. The dauntless monk waved his hand, and the two monks arrived at the top of the mountain together, greeting the unraging monk again. Unfortunately, the main hall has been occupied today. Please come sit in the side hall, Senior Brother, said the dauntless monk. May I ask who is in there listening to the meditation assembly? The monk king of the Seven Treasures pointed at the main hall and asked. A disciple. The dauntless monk was reluctant to talk too much. He exchanged glances with the unraging monk, both wondering why the monk king of the Seven Treasures had come. The three of them sat down in the side hall, and the young monk served them tea. The monk king of the Seven Treasures touched his lips before setting it down gently. Is this tea not to your liking, Senior Brother? The dauntless monk asked. I'm used to the 3-leaf Bodhi tea of the Lingua Temple. Other teas just lack a hint of Zen, said the monk king of the Seven Treasures. The temple is cramped, so there's no better tea. However, there are a few jars of fine alcohol. Will you be able to drink it, Senior Brother Seven Treasures? The unraging monk chuckled and drank all the tea in his cup. Junior brother unraging is still the same as before. Although your murderousness has lessened by a lot, the smell of alcohol and meat has become heavier. The school of Zen may not be bound by secular etiquette, but we still have to abide by the precepts of Buddhism, or how are we supposed to set an example for the masses? The monk king of the Seven Treasures frowned slightly. Only senior brother Seven Treasures can shoulder the great responsibility of setting an example for the masses. Someone as slow-witted as me can only hope, said the unraging monk. The monk king of the Seven Treasures could hear the mockery in his words. He smiled. I'd advise you not to be too impudent today, junior brother. The unraging monk raised an eyebrow. Right when he was about to say something, the dauntless monk asked, You never come without a reason. Why have you come to the Green Province instead of cultivating in the Dragon Province, senior brother? Speaking of which, this does have something to do with junior brother unraging. Do you have a disciple called Li Qingshan? Asked the monk king of the Seven Treasures. The unraging monk shivered inside. That's right. 7 days ago, the third crown prince of Great Xia, Si Qing, wrote a letter to the imperial court, saying that this Li Qingshan practiced demonic arts and became a demon king, becoming a lackey of the demon domain. Our great Lingua Temple bears the responsibility of monitoring all monks in the world, so we were given the orders of the imperial advisor of the left to specially investigate this matter. May I ask where Li Qingshan is right now? Get him out here. The monk king of the Seven Treasures said indifferently, but his words left no room for doubt. He directly treated the Chan monastery of Devanaga as his own backyard. When he recalled Si Qing's instructions and promises before he had set off, his confidence became firmer. Li Qingshan had destroyed Si Qing's body, and he had finally found a new body after much difficulty. He spent a lot of time merging it with his soul, but it was unavoidable for his cultivation to suffer a great loss. His hatred towards Li Qingshan ran as deep as the ocean. Originally, when the crown prince's body was destroyed and he was basically on the brink of death, that was enough for the imperial court to fly into a thunderous rage. However, it was a fair duel with Li Qingshan, and he was the one who had proposed a duel to the death. If they made things difficult for him because of that, he would just be asking to be humiliated. He would only become a laughingstock. As a result, he came up with this idea. The dauntless monk frowned. Sure enough, he had come with ill intentions. The Lingua Temple was known as the greatest temple in the world, the leader of the Buddhist sects of the 9 provinces. The abbot of the Lingua Temple was one of the 2 grand imperial advisors of Great Xia, possessing the status of commanding all the Buddhist disciples in the world. Even when the abbot of the Chan monastery of Devanaga took over the legacy, they had to obtain permission from the Lingua Temple. Although it was just a formality, it was enough to demonstrate their mights. Apart from their status, they also possessed corresponding strength. There were countless monk kings in the past. Even in today's Great Xia's decline, the dauntless monks still dared not underestimate them. Bastard! The unraging monk cursed aloud. What did you say? The monk king of the Seven Treasures was infuriated. Senior brother Seven Treasures, don't misunderstand. I'm not talking about you, but this kid, Si Qing. He lost in the duel, but instead of working hard on his cultivation, he slandered my disciple as a demon king. He's utterly humiliated the imperial family. Our Chan monastery of Devanaga possesses a secret technique, the demon suppression statuary. It might seem a little similar to demonic arts, but it's a genuine Buddhist cultivation method. I practice this cultivation method, so don't tell me I'm also a demon king. Chapter 1039. You are you, and Li Qingshan is Li Qingshan. You can't mix them up. If he really hasn't fallen into the demonic path, why don't you let him out? The monk king of Seven Treasures questioned. The dauntless monk said, I'll be honest, senior brother Seven Treasures. The person currently listening to the assembly of meditation in the Grand Hall is Li Qingshan. If he really is a demon king, why would he still be alive? The Seven Treasures monk king's heart skipped a beat. The fact that Li Qingshan could listen to the meditation Dharma assembly in peace basically proved that Li Qingshan was not some demon king. However, he had not rushed over from the Dragon Province to prove that. Then all I can do is wait for the assembly of meditation to end. When the time comes, I'll have to invite your esteemed disciple to the Dragon Province with me. Senior brother Seven Treasures, isn't this a little too overbearing? The dauntless monk became stern. Let alone the fact that Li Qingshan practiced demonic arts, the Dragon Province would be the territory of the Imperial clan. There were countless ways to deal with him. This matter concerns the crown prince of the Imperial family, so I can't make a rash decision. We can only go to the Guqing Temple and ask the Imperial advisor of the left to decide who is right and who is wrong. The dauntless monk and the unraging monk exchanged glances. They both found the situation to be extremely troublesome. He was also an eminent monk of Buddhism, a monk king conferred by the empire. They could not treat him as an enemy. Once Li Qingshan emerged from seclusion, he would definitely kick up a fuss. Li Qingshan was not the type of person to be led around by the nose obediently. He could show mercy to the unraging monk, but he would definitely become tempted to kill a monk who had specially come from the Dragon Province to deal with him. By then, it would truly be impossible to deal with. In the blink of an eye, an entire night passed. When the sky lit up, the Buddhist glow gradually faded. The flowers drifted away, and the golden lotus wilted. The lofty Buddha closed its eyes. Li Qingshan slowly opened his eyes. The entire world had changed, as if a decade had passed. A hint of gentleness appeared on his tough face. He smiled. Interesting. Although the benefits of the Zen Heart Dharma Assembly were not obvious, it had a far-reaching impact. It would allow one to have a deeper understanding of one's own cultivation path. He had also gained new insights into how to balance fire and water to further improve the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra. This was equivalent to raising one's comprehension ability from the root. However, there were also some side effects, such as compassionate heart. After all, it was a Buddhist great art, unlike the Banyan Tree King's pursuit of natural balance. Li Qingshan's ears twitched as he heard the sounds of argument coming from outside the door. Senior brother Seven Treasures, please wait. In front of the entrance of the Grand Hall, the unraging monk stopped the monk king of the Seven Treasures. Didn't the Diana Heart Method conference end? Please ask your disciple to come out and meet me. To obstruct him like this, could it be that he had a guilty conscience? Or perhaps devils? Seven Treasure Monk King said. Only you know who has ghosts and demons in your heart. A smear of anger flashed through the unraging monk's face. The monk king of the Seven Treasures was clearly targeting Li Qingshan because of Si Qing. After the Dharma assembly, I still need to meditate and comprehend it in order to completely master it. Senior martial brother, why don't you take a while longer? As the dauntless monk said that, he shot a glance at the unraging monk. Amitba, don't misunderstand, Junior Unraging. I just don't want a 10,000-year-old monastery like the Chan Monastery of Devanaga to become a place that hides filth and shelters demons. There's no harm in waiting a little longer. The monk king of the Seven Treasures instead seemed extremely composed. He refused to believe that Li Qingshan could hide in the Grand Hall for the rest of his life. The unraging monk hesitated before saying to Li Qingshan, "Qingshan, don't come out for now." "Master, who's outside?" Li Qingshan asked in surprise. The unraging monk roughly explained the entire story, as well as his many worries about the Guqing Temple. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it's unavoidable. If this damned Baldy dares to screw me over, I'll definitely make sure he doesn't leave the Green Province alive. Li Qingshan said firmly. He already found it rather regretful that he had failed to kill Si Qing, yet he was actually urging others to deal with him. What else was there to say? He would kill as many as they came. The unraging monk thought, oh no. There was a rumble behind him, and the door to the Grand Hall opened, revealing Li Qingshan's large figure. The wildflower blade at the end of his life was surprisingly placed on his back. Perhaps he had sensed his killing intent, but he instead calmed down and said nothing more. The monk king of the Seven Treasures' eyes flashed. He actually felt intimidated by Li Qingshan's bearing. Sure enough, a person who could destroy Si Qing's body was anything but ordinary. He had actually completely concealed his aura, so he must have been purposefully hiding something. It was said that this child was not even a century old, so he must have ties to the demon domain. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to achieve his cultivation at such a young age unless he received the assistance of some powerful existence. You're Li Qingshan? I am. Li Qingshan stepped over the door sill and arrived before the monk king of the 7 treasures. He took less than 10 steps. Pay a visit to the Dragon Province with me. The monk king of the 7 treasures said indifferently, naturally giving off a sense of superiority and command. This was the pride he had nurtured since he came from the Guqing temple. Regardless of the sect or temple, all Buddhist disciples in the world had to obey the orders of the Guqing temple. Why should I? Li Qingshan asked coldly. What, do you want to fight me? The monk king of the 7 treasures smiled as if Li Qingshan's resistance was both within his expectations, yet it was also very laughable. Why can't I? Li Qingshan smiled as well. Your viciousness and rebellious nature truly are as clear as day. Very well. I just happen to want to see just what your demonic arts are capable of. The staff in the monk king of the 7 treasures paused, and the golden rings clanged. It was impossible for Li Qingshan to hide his aura during a battle. As long as they could test his true cultivation, as long as he had even the slightest connection to demon folk, they did not even have to take him back to the Dragon Province. They could directly request the dauntless monk to capture him, or they would be colluding with the demon domain. The Chan monastery of Devanaga definitely could not afford to bear that label. Li Qingshan did not think too much about it. A single strike was enough anyway. With a few words, the two of them became on edge. The battle was on the verge of erupting. Suddenly, a plump figure blocked between the two of them. The unraging monk frowned firmly. What he feared really happened. The monk king of the 7 treasures could not die here, or he would be unable to give an explanation to the Guqing temple or even all the Buddhist disciples in the world. Junior brother unraging, it's already reached a time like this, yet you're still trying to protect your own? Are you really going to cast all the precepts of Buddhism to the back of your head? I'd rather wonder whether the demon suppression statuary is a demonic art or not, which is why you've become so frenzied. The monk king of the 7 treasures called out. It's not that I'm trying to protect my own. I just can't bear to see senior brother's blood splatter all over Great Buddha Mountain. The unraging monk said emotionlessly. After witnessing Li Qingshan's strength and the blade style of the wildflower blade soul, even he was not confident he could defeat Li Qingshan. If they actually fought, a single strike would probably determine the outcome of the battle. Blood splatter all over Great Buddha Mountain. What bold words. I'd like to see just how I'll splatter all over Great Buddha Mountain. The monk king of the 7 treasures completely ignored the unraging monk's warning. In order to save face, Siqing did not even go into detail about how he had lost to Li Qingshan. If they had not witnessed it with their own eyes, no one would believe that Li Qingshan, who had just undergone the 3rd heavenly tribulation recently, could defeat or even kill the monk king of the 7 treasures. The unraging monk frowned. He really was reckless. Yet he could not actually let him die. He was basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. Chapter 1040. Li Qingshan smiled. Little and landed gently in front of the grand hall. The sunlight gilded her. When she smiled, even the heavenly flowers and golden lotuses dimmed. She did not hide her aura. Her surroundings seemed to be enshrouded in a Buddhist glow, possessing both the restraint and self-discipline of the school of Vinaya and the cleverness and naturalness of a Zen disciple. One will greets the dauntless abbot. Amitba. One will, you finally returned. The dauntless monk suppressed the joy on his face and chanted the Buddha's name softly. Compared to a secular disciple like Li Qingshan, who was so mischievous that he had almost fallen into the demonic path, Little and was the true star of hope for the monastery. Her almost godlike rate of cultivation had left him overjoyed once again. The unraging monk glanced at Li Qingshan. Compared to his murderous, unruly appearance, the goddess-like Little and did indeed possess the bearing of a Buddhist disciple. Your one will? The monk king of the 7 treasures' eyes lit up. He attempted to scrutinize Little and with a critical gaze, but he discovered he could not find any faults with her at all. Even though it was just her bluish-white monk's robes, It made his embroidered kasaya pale in comparison, yet he could not develop any jealousy. Little and nodded and said nothing more. You want to compete with me? The monk king of the 7 treasures asked. Little and nodded again. She remained rather impolite, but she seemed dignified and generous, such that the monk king of the 7 treasures was unable to develop any anger at all. Instead, he praised, I've heard of your great name in the Lingua Temple, but I never thought you'd already undergone the 3rd heavenly tribulation. You truly are a Buddhist genius. You're too kind, monk king. You want to compete with me for this child? The monk king of the 7 treasures pointed at Li Qingshan. For the monastery. Little and brought her palms together and said in a manner that was neither obsequious nor overbearing, Amitabha. The dauntless monk chanted the Buddha's name, feeling gratified from the bottom of his heart. Li Qingshan curled his lips and thought to himself, this old man, I've done so many good deeds, but you've turned a blind eye to it. Little An's words have made you so happy. It seemed that even the eminent monks of Buddhism could not avoid being deceived by this great beauty illusion, especially after she comprehended the unity of Buddha and devil and found her human heart. Her great beauty illusion reached a new realm. Moreover, it seemed to have a special effect on Buddhists. The 7 treasures monk king pondered for a moment, then sighed, forget it, we are both Buddhist disciples, I don't want to fight with you. Li Qingshan couldn't help but say, hey, I'm also a Buddhist disciple, even though I'm a layman disciple. The monk king of the 7 treasures glanced at Li Qingshan. He felt that it was beneath him to talk to him. Then he said to Little and amicably, with your cultivation, it's enough for you to be conferred the title of monk king. Why don't you come with me to the Lingua Temple in the Dragon Province to be conferred the title? The imperial advisor has asked about you before. He'll definitely bestow you with grace when he sees you. The imperial advisor knows me too? Little asked. Yeah, and he even praised me very much. Now that I've seen you today, you really do live up to your reputation. Senior brother 7 treasures, you don't have to go to the Lingua Temple to be conferred the title of monk king, right? The dauntless monk immediately stood forward to object. He felt an intense sense of danger. There's a saying, it's a waste to be a monk if you don't go to the Lingua Kingdom. Being conferred the title is only a small matter. Broadening your horizons is what's important. After seeing Little and the monk king of the 7 treasures changed his target for this trip. Standing up for Si Ching was only a small matter. Recruiting a talented disciple for the Lingua Temple was what was important. The reason why the Lingua Temple could become the greatest temple in the world was not because of the support of the Great Xia Empire alone. Instead, it had absorbed talents from the entire 9 provinces and constantly nurtured its foundation. There would be a time when the Great Xia Empire would fade away, but the Lingua Temple could continue on for generations to come. Many of the talents that the Lingua Temple absorbed were outstanding disciples from other temples and sections. However, they would never force their way in, nor was there a need for them to force their way in, as Buddhist disciples all had the habit of traveling the world to broaden their horizons and temper their minds. As a holy land of Buddhism, the Lingua Temple was often their first choice. Countless monks visited the Lingua Temple. As long as they demonstrated sufficient strength or potential, they would receive special treatment, and the resources they received would be even greater than what they received from their original sections. Most of these monks stayed there. Although they did not originate from the Lingua Temple, they were no different from the monks of the Lingua Temple. As time went by, the Lingua Temple became stronger and stronger, and it could absorb the strengths of others, accepting the thoughts of various schools of thought. Even if many monks could not receive special treatment, they were still willing to stay there to cultivate, increasing their cultivation through constant communications. Although the other temples and sects had lost disciples, they could only suffer in silence, as this was a set of rules that had existed since the founding of Buddhism. It was of great benefit to the entire Buddhism, and the Chan monastery of Devanaga was no different from the Green Province. One has just returned from the Mist Province. There's no need for her to go to the Dragon Province to broaden her horizons. The dauntless monk's face immediately sank, and his voice became cold and forceful. The Mist Province is a land of wilderness. Evil sects run rampant, and demonic cultivators run amok. How can it be mentioned in the same breath as the Dragon Province and the Lingua Temple? The monk king of Seven Treasures answered with a question. In Senior Brother Seven Treasures' opinion, even the Chan Monastery of Devanaga of the Green Province is nowhere close to the Lingua Temple. The dauntless monk said coldly, "I've never said that," said the monk king of Seven Treasures, but his expression was even more convincing than his words. "Don't go too far, Seven Treasures. This is the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, not the Lingua Temple." The dauntless monk was angered, but he was actually rather guilty. Little and had not grown up in the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, so her extraordinary temperament was particularly difficult to grasp. She did not seem to have much loyalty towards the sect, only a bitter pursuit of the ultimate Buddhist Dharma. Going to the Guqing Temple was indeed the best choice, let alone the fact that the imperial advisor had taken a liking to her. If she really agreed to go to the Lingua Temple to cultivate, it would not even be considered a betrayal. "What? Do you want my blood to splatter across Great Buddha Mountain too, Junior Brother?" The monk king of Seven Treasures smiled. As the dauntless monk and the monk king of Seven Treasures confronted each other over whether Little and would stay or go, Li Qingshan suddenly felt like he had become irrelevant. He could not help but shrug. "Does this have anything to do with me?" Little and arrived beside him silently and held his hand gently. "It's fine. Girl, you sure know how to steal the limelight. You're basically the bane of monks." Li Qingshan rubbed her head and raised his head, only to see the monk king of Seven Treasures glaring at him. "The bane of monks? How horrible." Little and stuck out her tongue and said to the monk king of Seven Treasures, "Master, thank you for your kindness, but forgive me for not being able to go to the Dragon Province for now." The dauntless monk sighed inside. Some things had not changed after all. He was unable to stop her from going to the Mist Province in the past, but he never thought there would be a day when he would use this method to make her stay in the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. "Fine then." The monk king of Seven Treasures sighed. Suddenly, he looked at Li Qingshan again. "Do you still want to clash with me? Up to you." After what had happened, especially after seeing Little and his temper had improved. He no longer had much killing intent anymore. "Then come at me." The monk king of Seven Treasures swung his staff. "Master Seven Treasures, I think you'd better let me experience what you're capable of. Move aside. I said I don't want to clash with you." Chapter 1041. All right. The monk king of the Seven Treasures' eyes lit up. This was exactly the result he wanted. "You can't," the dauntless monk said before turning to the monk king of the Seven Treasures. "Seven Treasures, you're bullying the weak. Do you really think there's no one in our Chan Monastery of Devanaga? Junior Brother, One Will is no longer a child. Before long, she'll be conferred the title of Monk King and stand on equal footing with us. Can't she even decide something as minor as this for herself?" The monk king of the Seven Treasures had already become certain that Little and was purposefully losing to him so that he could join the Lingua Temple legitimately. This competition was just to give the dauntless monk an explanation. "Don't worry, Abbot. I won't lose," said Little and look. The monk king of the Seven Treasures smiled at the dauntless monk. He did not take Little Anne's words to heart at all. Having reached this point, even the dauntless monk was unable to stop him anymore. He glanced at Little and deeply. "You're on your own. One Will, you go first." The monk king of the Seven Treasures said to Little and amicably, "Please go first, Master." Little and let go of Li Qingshan's hand and made his way over slowly. "Fair enough." The monk king of the Seven Treasures waved his hand, and the golden threads and jewels on his kasaya glistened under the sunlight. He was in no hurry to fight. He asked, "Do you know why I'm known as the Seven Treasures?" "There are 7 treasures in Buddhism. The Master's name originates from them," said Little Anne. "Which 7 treasures? Violet gold, silver, glass, crystal, giant clam, coral, and amber." "That's right. I practice the scripture of the 7 treasures of the Lingua Temple. Among the current Buddhist disciples, only I've reached such a level with this cultivation method, and I've also refined the 7 treasures of Buddhism. They serve as my life-bound Buddhist treasures," the monk king of the 7 treasures said rather complacently. The dauntless monk frowned. Arcane treasures were fine too. Buddhist treasures were fine too. Cultivators could only wield a limited number. Although he could wield 7 Buddhist treasures, their power would definitely be greatly affected, and they would interfere with one another. When he faced an enemy, he was instead better off using 2 or 3 Buddhist treasures. On the other hand, the 7 treasures monk king could use 7 Buddhist treasures at the same time. Not only was their power not reduced at all, but they were even able to complement each other and display even greater effects. Even if they weren't invincible, there were very few people who could defeat them. No matter how talented Little N was, he had only just undergone 3 heavenly tribulations. His cultivation was already significantly weaker than the 7 treasures of the Buddhist sect. There was no chance of victory at all. Master's Dharma is profound, I am impressed. When the 7 treasures monk monarch heard this, he faintly smiled and raised the staff in his hand. The golden rings jingled. This Buddhist staff is made of purple gold. If you want to slay demons, this treasure is enough. Today, I might as well let you experience it. During the conversation, a silver light flashed, and another silver wheel flew out of his sleeve. As it spun, it emitted a dazzling silver light, illuminating the summit of the mountain in a silvery white color. Its sharpness was enough to split mountains. A large golden hand that seemed both real and illusory reached out from behind the 7 treasure monk king, raising a glazed cup. Light rippled within, giving one the feeling that it contained a great lake. Once it was poured down, it would flood Great Buddha Mountain. Wonderful! Little N praised. These 3 Buddhist treasures were not only external objects used to defeat the enemy, they were also closely related to the 7 treasures monk king, as if they were one. After cultivating these 7 treasures and receiving the title of monk king, all the opponents I have met in my life can at most make me use these 3 treasures. The 7 treasures monk king said. I wonder what the other 4 treasures look like? Little N did not have the slightest battle intent, as if he was a humble disciple asking for guidance from his master. Since you have spoken, then let me broaden your horizons. The 7 treasures monk king smiled and took out the 7 treasures, a 7-colored crystal sword, an unpolished white clam, a bright red coral mountain, as well as a string of amber beads. Each of them emitted a different kind of radiance. In a split second, the light of the treasures shone in all directions, shining brightly, surpassing the blazing sun rising from the east. The 7 treasures monk king stood at the center of this myriad of colors. A faintly discernible Buddha image appeared behind him. It had 3 heads and 6 arms, overflowing with light and color. Its 6 arms were extended, each holding one of the 6 treasures, appearing even more dignified and magnificent. This is Duobao Tathagata, the Buddha of the Eastern Pure World of Treasures, as well as the Buddha I worship. The dauntless monk and the unraging monk both lowered their heads and chanted Duobao Tathagata's Buddhist name. Although the school of Chan worshipped the Buddha in their hearts, where there was no need for anything beyond the Dharma, they still maintained absolute reverence towards the true Buddha, even if it was just an illusion or a statue. Only Li Qingshan straightened his neck and stared straight at the Buddha image. Apart from the color being a little prettier, it did not seem to be much different from the other Buddha images. What an unfilial son. If it weren't for the fact that I had other plans today, I definitely would have made you suffer. The 7 treasures monk king was displeased, but he viewed Little N's posture of gazing at the Buddha as a sign of reverence towards the Buddhist Dharma. I can practice the scripture of the 7 treasures Dharma essence not only because of my talent and comprehension, but also because of the great support of the Lingua Temple, which is why I can refine the 7 treasures. If it were a regular sect, even if they possessed a cultivation method like this, no one would be able to practice it. The dauntless monk could not refute the 7 treasures monk king's words. Not only were the 7 Buddhist treasures precious because of their great value, but they were also difficult to collect. Only the Dragon Province had a collection of all the wondrous treasures in the world. What do you think? If you want to see it, I'll show it to you. Do you still want to compete? The 7 treasures monk king smiled at Little N. One will. If you want to go, then go. With your talent and comprehension, you'll be able to stand out no matter where you go. The dauntless monk let out a long sigh. He did not even have confidence in defeating the Seven Treasures Monk King. At most, he could only remain undefeated. Little An's bet was basically delivering himself to him. Master of the Seven Treasures, I can defeat you. Little An's voice was just as calm as before. Even the respect towards the Seven Treasures Monk King from his tone and expression did not decrease at all. However, what he said left everyone stunned apart from Li Qingshan. In particular, the Seven Treasures Monk King doubted his ears. He looked at Little An. What did you say? Li Qingshan sat on the high sill of the Grand Hall as if it had nothing to do with him. Normally speaking, it was impossible for him to defeat the Seven Treasures Monk King if he hid the path of white bone and great beauty and just his cultivation in the Buddhist Dharma. However, he was even more at ease with Little An than with himself. I can defeat you, said Little An. The Seven Treasures Monk King smiled instead of becoming angry. All right then. Come at me. Be careful. Little An extended his right hand and also revealed a Buddhist treasure. A string of golden prayer beads was attached to his pure white wrist that seemed to be carved from ivory. With a gentle wave of his hand, it scattered into a sky of golden stars, vaguely falling into a formation and flying towards the Seven Treasures Monk King. The Seven Treasures Monk King originally did not take the prayer beads seriously. It was just a regular Buddhist treasure. Only when the 33 prayer beads enveloped him did his expression change in shock. That's impossible. Chapter 1042. Immediately, the resplendent glow was suppressed viciously, circling several meters around the Monk King of the Seven Treasures. The figure of Duobao Rulai behind him shuddered as well, as if it could collapse at any time. The dauntless monk and the unraging monk exchanged glances. Their eyes were filled with shock. They had no idea how to describe their current feelings with words. Then they looked at Little An together. Little An's eyes remained as calm as ever. There was no complacency on his face at all. He remained humble and polite. Master of the Seven Treasures, this is my Buddhist treasure. Please guide me. The Monk King of the Seven Treasures was no longer in the mood to respond to her. He powered the 7 Buddhist treasures as hard as he could, charging left and right. The 33 golden prayer beads revolved, but they did not continue to press down. Instead, they allowed the Monk King of the Seven Treasures to destroy the formation. In order to hide the cultivation of the path of white bone and great beauty, the skeleton demon formation was not able to unleash its full power, but it still easily suppressed the Monk King of the Seven Treasures. No matter what he did, he was unable to shake it at all. The red sun rose up in the east slowly. Time passed by slowly. The Monk King of the Seven Treasures' forehead became covered in sweat. He was no longer in high spirits like he just now. He was filled with worry. Everything before him had exceeded his imagination, such that he still struggled to accept it. Little An suddenly took a step forward. His right hand landed on the hilt of the blade on his waist. As he walked, the skull prayer beads pressed down slowly, like a mountain pressing down. It was unstoppable. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. She wanted to use vexation severing? If she used vexation severing, the dauntless monk would definitely recognize it. How was she supposed to explain it then? Little An arrived before the Monk King of the Seven Treasures. The skull prayer beads had already pressed down on a radius of several meters around him. The figure of Duobao Rulai collapsed loudly. Under his shocked gaze, the blade flashed like snow. Don't. The dauntless monk stopped him loudly. No matter how much he loathed the Monk King of the Seven Treasures, he could not allow his blood to actually splatter across Great Buddha Mountain. Otherwise, how was he supposed to face all the Buddhists in the world? The Lingua Temple would never just let the matter go, but everything had happened far too quickly. He was actually unable to stop it in time. In the blink of an eye, the glow of treasures, the Buddhist glow, and the blade all vanished. The Seven Treasures Monk King sat on the ground, his expression fluctuating. Sometimes he frowned in contemplation, sometimes he was vexed and remorseful, and sometimes he smiled happily. Little An sheathed his saber and stood there quietly. Could this saber be? The dauntless monk exclaimed. The moment the vexation-severing blade was drawn, he had clearly seen the blade's appearance. Although the vexation-severing blade had already been lost for many years, every single curve was clearly engraved in the minds of the past abbot. They dared not forget it, nor could they forget it. The impact it had on him was even greater than the 33 Buddhist prayer beads. Trouble-severing blade. What do you think? Little An waved his right hand like a willow branch, and the skull prayer beads returned to his wrist. So, this is the trouble-severing blade. It is indeed mysterious. 7 treasures thanks me. 7 treasures. Monk King stood up, put his palms together, and bowed deeply to Little An. Master, you don't have to be so polite. Little An stepped aside. What a waste of my several centuries of cultivation. I was caught up in greed, but I didn't even realize it. I even became arrogant and committed the sin of lying. It's all thanks to your strike that I was enlightened, the Monk King of the 7 treasures said in shame. If it were not for the fact that he knew about the wondrous power of the trouble-severing blade, Li Qingshan basically would have suspected that Little An had smashed the Monk King of the 7 treasures' head. The effects were basically perfect. If he took action, killing the Monk King of the 7 treasures would be easy, but he would definitely make a great enemy out of the Lingua Temple. Even if he failed and did not kill him, the Monk King of the 7 treasures would definitely return in resentment. He would gain another enemy from then on. Li Qingshan had never been afraid of falling out with people, but he hated trouble. Little An's strike really did seem like he was cutting off his troubles. I'm returning to the Lingua Temple for secluded cultivation. Farewell. The Monk King of the 7 treasures let out a long sigh. Take care, senior brother 7 treasures. The dauntless monk was in a hurry to ask about the trouble-severing blade, so he was in no mood to make the Monk King of the 7 treasures stay. Before he left, the Monk King of the 7 treasures said to Li Qingshan, even if you're not a demon king, you're definitely not a Buddhist. The crown prince of Si Qing's grievances with you run as deep as the ocean, so you better take care of yourself. Don't worry, master. All men have their revenge. I'll cut down a clown like him sooner or later, Li Qingshan said. The Monk King of the 7 treasures glanced at Li Qingshan deeply before saying to Little An, the bestowment of the Monk King will arrive very soon. The gates of the Lingua Temple are always open to you. Only then did he take off. Compared to when he came, he seemed much more discreet. One will, where did you obtain the trouble-severing blade? As soon as the Monk King of the 7 treasures had left, the dauntless monk asked in a hurry. Dauntless abbot, this isn't the place to talk, Little An said. As a result, they arrived in the grand hall. Little An drew out the trouble-severing blade again and passed it to the dauntless monk. The dauntless monk accepted the trouble-severing blade with both hands. His mind was in turmoil, completely drawn away by the blade in his hand. He murmured, sure enough, it really is the trouble-severing blade. He could not be blamed for being so excited. The trouble-severing blade held far too great a significance to the Chan monastery of Devanaga. Even 10 Buddhist treasures paled in comparison. The blade was given to me by the Golden Cicada Spirit King, said Little An, the Golden Cicada Spirit King. Only then did the dauntless monk shift his eyes away from the trouble-severing blade. He frowned slightly. This was a name that the Chan monastery of Devanaga could never forget. Why did he give it to you? He used the chant of Devanaga as an exchange, said Little An. You. The dauntless monk pointed at Little An. If a regular disciple were bold enough to pass on the supreme cultivation technique of the Chan monastery of Devanaga to the Golden Cicada Spirit King, he would directly capture them. Even if he took back the trouble-severing blade, he would still punish them heavily. I've violated the sect's rules. Please punish me, abbot, said Little An. Forget it. You've done a great service to the Chan monastery of Devanaga by retrieving the blade. You can say your merits make up for your faults. The dauntless monk hesitated a few times, but in the end he still waved his hand helplessly. Rules and precepts were important, but they had to be flexible. As the abbot, he still had to consider the Chan monastery of Devanaga's 10,000-year-old heritage first. There was no reason for him to destroy his own foundation. And, upon further thought, if the Golden Cicada Spirit King offered him something like that, he would have to consider it. With little An's identity and cultivation, he already had the right to make a decision like that for the Chan monastery of Devanaga. Thinking like that, he felt much better. I'm not just exchanging for the blade, added little An. What else? The dauntless monk asks. And the soaring locust king's life, said little An. What? The golden cicada spirit king is about to ascend soon. I've already told the soaring locust king about this. Little An's explanation was simple, but none of the people present were stupid. They immediately outlined a rough plan in their heads. The soaring locust king's hatred for the golden cicada spirit king ran extremely deep. When the golden cicada spirit king ascended, the soaring locust king would definitely stop him regardless of the consequences. As long as they cast down an inescapable net, they would definitely be able to kill the golden cicada spirit king. Perhaps they could put an end to the millennia of grievances between the Chan monastery of Devanaga and the golden cicada spirit king. Li Qingshan looked at little An in surprise. This had already completely deviated from their original plan. If everything really went according to their expectations, they could completely remain uninvolved and watch the great cultivators of the Green Province surround and kill the soaring locust king. They would not have to take any risks at all. Chapter 1043. The dauntless monk hesitated. He wanted to say something, but he hesitated. Little and immediately understood. He smiled. Abbot, do you want to try the power of the trouble-severing blade too? Yeah. Who doesn't have troubles in life? The dauntless monk shook his head with a smile. Little and said nothing more. He swung the blade in a backhand manner, and the hall was illuminated by the blade before rapidly returning to its darkness. The dauntless monk brought his palms together and stood where he was, without moving at all. Only a while later did he open his eyes and praise, "This blade really is wondrous." There's another one here. Li Qingshan placed his hand on the unraging monk's shoulder and called out to little An, "I have far too many troubles. I can't cut them down, so it's fine if I don't cut them down. It's just like how people stop itching when they have too many lice, and they stop worrying when they have too many troubles." The unraging monk swatted away Li Qingshan's hand and chuckled. "The master is wise, so you obviously don't need the assistance of an external object like this," said little An. "I've already called one lamp over. He's only a step away from the third heavenly tribulation, so he happens to be in need of this blade," said the dauntless monk. The unraging monk did not need it, but the thousands of disciples of the Chan monastery of Devanaga did. After personally experiencing the wondrous power of the trouble-severing blade, he had already formed a picture of this in his head. All of the disciples of the monastery would be free of worries, and their cultivation would advance drastically. "All right," said little An. The dauntless monk mentioned a few more names in thought. They were all renowned figures in the monastery. People would always have some troubles in life, and the troubles of cultivators were not necessarily any less than those of mortals. In particular, mortals could live with their troubles, but cultivators, especially Buddhist cultivators, would struggle to advance their cultivation if they could not put an end to their troubles. If their troubles ran too deep, they would turn into inner demons. The trouble-severing blade was basically a savior that had descended from the heavens. Even if little and did not inherit the position of abbot, he would still possess an extremely great status as the wielder of the blade, not to mention his startling strength. Standing before the dauntless monk, he no longer seemed weak at all. "Senior brother, worries are Bodhi," the unraging monk said suddenly. If a person had never encountered any troubles since birth, then they definitely did not possess so-called intelligence. If they did not possess intelligence, then even if their troubles were temporarily severed, they would definitely return very soon. It would all be for naught at the end of the day. Amitba, junior brother is right. I was too happy. The dauntless monk rearranged the list in his head, greatly reducing the number of people on it. He secretly made up his mind that the trouble-severing blade could only be used to save disciples who were deeply troubled, almost turning into an inner demon. Before long, the people on the list arrived at the Hall of Great Strength. Li Qingshan noticed that some of them were strong and some were weak, but they all looked miserable. An old monk, in particular, looked like a patient with severe depression. His eyes were sunken, and his face was ashen. In comparison, even the ugly face of one lamp was more pleasing to the eye. "Abbot, why did you summon us here?" Monk-Eating asked. "You've all been plagued by troubles, which has affected your cultivations. One will just happen to retrieve the sect treasure of our monastery, the trouble-severing blade. You can give it a try," said the dauntless monk. The monks were all excited and surprised. The trouble-severing blade. Is it really that trouble-severing blade? Didn't it end up in the hands of the golden cicada spirit king? Another person asked. "Though, Abbot, the trouble-severing blade is the supreme treasure of our monastery. It won't be that easy to control, right?" "You don't have to worry. One will has already undergone the third heavenly tribulation. She'll be conferred the title of Monk King soon." The hall fell silent. Everyone's gazes gathered on little Anne, who did not know what the two words, Monk King, meant. The dauntless monk said, "If there's anyone who doesn't want to rely on external objects and wants to resolve their troubles with their own willpower, please take a step back." A while later, not a single monk took a step back. The dauntless monk nodded in satisfaction. At least they all knew their limits. "There's no need for you to feel that relying on external objects is shameful. I've just tested the blade myself, and the Monk King of the Seven Treasures from the Lingua Temple has benefited tremendously too. Although the effects of the trouble-severing blade are only temporary, as long as you remember the feeling of that split second and maintain a clear mind, it'll definitely bring great benefits to your cultivation." As a result, the monks took turns stepping forward to receive little Anne's strike. Li Qingshan watched on from one side and sighed inside. She really has changed. On the left shoulder of Great Buddha Mountain, in a quiet monastery, Li Qingshan pushed open the moon gate and gazed at the rising and falling mountains in the distance. However, he felt rather unsettled inside. Suddenly, he turned around and asked, "You finished severing them all?" Little Anne stood quietly under the Bodhi tree in the courtyard. "That's good." The courtyard suddenly fell silent. Only the moonlight shone down quietly. Li Qingshan organized his words, but he had no idea how to start. "Qingshan, are you blaming me for changing the plan on my own?" "I'm not blaming you. You're doing this for my own good. However, we owe the Golden Cicada Spirit King a debt of gratitude. Aren't you biting the hand that fed you?" Li Qingshan frowned. He had always been a person who kept clear tabs on his debts of gratitude, but little Anne's plan had sold out the Golden Cicada Spirit King as well. It went against his principles. Little Anne strolled over to his side and leaned into his arms gently. Helping the Golden Cicada Spirit King successfully ascend is also part of the plan. "What do you mean?" "We have two objectives. The first is to help the Golden Cicada Spirit King, and the second is to kill the Soaring Locust King. However, the Soaring Locust King isn't that easy to kill." Li Qingshan nodded. A great demon king with no bottom line was far too disgusting. "But if the two of us work together, we should have a 70 to 80% chance of success." "No, it's not that high. I'm the greatest variable. The Green Province is not the sea." When the Golden Cicada Spirit King undergoes his tribulation, it'll definitely draw the attention of all the great cultivators, and once I unleash the path of white bone and great beauty, the Buddhist sects of the world will no longer tolerate me. I'll definitely be treated as a great enemy by the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. It might even lead to a chaotic battle, but I'm unwilling to kill a single person from the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. And, if the Golden Cicada Spirit King wants to ascend successfully, it's very likely that the Chan Monastery of Devanaga will be an obstacle only second to the Soaring Locust King. I believe the dauntless abbot hopes for him to die with the Soaring Locust King the most, so instead of leaving it up to fate, it's better to reduce the number of variables as much as possible. I've already told the dauntless abbot that the Golden Cicada Spirit King is willing to risk failing his ascension to destroy the Soaring Locust King. The Golden Cicada Spirit King has done that in the past, so it won't be difficult for him to convince others. He's also handed over the affliction-severing blade, so you can treat it as him taking the initiative to make peace. I believe the dauntless abbot will make the correct choice. Little Anne's eyes shone with a wise light. Li Qingshan was immediately rendered speechless. Not only did her plan give them greater confidence in killing the soaring Locust King, but it also gave the Golden Cicada Spirit King even greater assurance in his ascension. It also did not require them to fight for their lives. And it was grand and honorable. She did not let down the Chan monastery of Devanaga, the Golden Cicada Spirit King, or even him. Chapter 1044. You just don't like to think about these things? Littleton smiled. I've already prepared myself for a great battle against the soaring Locust King. You sure know how to ruin my plans. Li Qingshan pinched her nose, half blaming and half doting. I just want to help you avoid as much trouble as possible, Littleton said, feeling wronged. I know, but you should discuss it with me first in the future. Sometimes, the simplest and most effective method is not necessarily the best method. No trouble means no challenge. My path is about advancing bravely, not hiding in the shadows and scheming. So I suddenly understand what it means to be troubled. Looks like I didn't eat the fruit of wisdom for nothing after all. Littleton could not help but laugh. She bit her lip and said, Yeah, I promise. Li Qingshan lowered his head and kissed her forehead gently. The red mole between her eyebrows was still as clear as ever, but her appearance had already changed from that of a confused child to that of a beautiful young lady. Her petite figure had become slender as well. Most importantly, she now had her own ideas and thoughts, which both comforted him and made him feel slightly melancholic. You'll probably be staying here for a few days, right? I want to participate in the entire plan. Fair enough. I'll make some time to pay a visit to the Sword Collection Palace and draw out the sword they owe me. Although the treasured sword of the Sword Collection Palace was already indispensable to Li Qingshan, it would be a waste if he did not want it. He could even take some revenge on the Sword Collection Palace, so why not? The Sword Collection Palace. Littleton said in thought. What's wrong? Nothing. You're stuttering again. All right, since you've recovered your memories, just who did this to you back then? Was it that Ming Fei or whatever? We have to avenge her. It's hard to say. Littleton shook her head. She was also slightly doubtful. It's not like we're in a hurry. Once this is over, we'll investigate it properly. I don't care which bastard did it. I'll drag them out one by one and let them bleed. As Li Qingshan said that, he was about to set off north. Littleton refused to let go and said gently, We'll leave tomorrow. All right. Thus, the two of them quietly embraced each other, gazing at the boundless mountains under the moonlight. Although they did not say much, they had a tacit understanding. On the top of Great Buddha Mountain, the dauntless monk watched this from afar and frowned a few times. In the end, he let out a long sigh and returned to his meditation room. He considered the person he wanted to contact this time. Of course, Chu Lai King was number one. King Chu's mansion. The steward of the prince's mansion led the two through winding corridors and arrived in front of a quiet little building. Before the steward could speak, the door suddenly opened and a middle-aged man walked out. He was dressed in a green luxurious robe and held a book in his hand. He looked at the two people behind the steward indifferently. One of them was a short old man with a face as black as charcoal, and the other was a slender woman with a face as white as jade. The woman's cultivation base was obviously a level higher than the old man's, but she was very respectful towards him. They were Ru Xin and Hua Ci. Hua Ci and Ru Xin from the School of Medicine greet your majesty. Chu Lai King asked, I heard you have a way to deal with the locust plague. I do, Ru Xin said confidently. You're not human? Chu Lai King squinted his eyes slightly. He could tell that Ru Xin possessed the presence of other folk with a single glance. He found it strange that he was unable to immediately determine which race she belonged to. Is that important? Ru Xin answered with a question. Answer honestly. Whether it's important or not isn't up to you to decide, the steward scolded. Is this how the king's estate treats talents? Ru Xin had seen much of the world, so she obviously would not be frightened by a steward. Instead, Hua Ci seemed rather uncomfortable, but it was not all that obvious with his dark face. Talents? There's not a single honored guest of the king's estate below the third heavenly tribulation. The corner of Chu Lai King's lips curled into a sneer that was not particularly obvious. Then your majesty can just let them deal with the locust plague. We'll be taking our leave, Ru Xian said. All right, tell me your plan. I hope you won't waste my time. Chu Lai King said. Ru Xian began to speak. At first, Chu Lai King was still rather indifferent. A problem that even a group of great cultivators had trouble dealing with. How could a Golden Core adept and a Foundation Establishment adept solve it? Not to mention, they were disciples of the School of Medicine who were not adept at fighting and killing. However, as Ru Xian continued to explain, he gradually became more serious. Every time he gathered honored guests for a discussion, the goal had always been to find the soaring Locust King and kill it. However, Ru Xian's proposal was a completely new method of dealing with it. Although it could not kill the soaring Locust King, it could stop the Locust Plague from the very core and force the soaring Locust King out. When Ru Xian stopped talking, Chu Lai King closed his eyes in thought for a while before opening them again. Don't waste any more time. Go spread the plague immediately. I'll send people to provide you with protection and cooperate with you as much as I can. Once you're done, you'll be honored guests of the king's estate. I'll personally hold a banquet to celebrate your success. Ru Xian and Hua Ci took their leave. Chu Lai King paced around the courtyard alone for a while before suddenly receiving a message from the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. He could not help but be delighted. Even the heavens are on my side. With this two-pronged approach, it's finally time to deal with this great problem. However, there was another piece of information hidden within that piqued his great curiosity. Not only has that one wolf found the affliction-severing blade and made an agreement with the Golden Cicada Spirit King, but she's even undergone the third heavenly tribulation and defeated the Monk King of the Seven Treasures. What an unbelievable prodigy! Even the profound Sun pales slightly in comparison. Although he had heard about Little and a long time ago, he had never seen him in person even once. He felt rather eager for some reason, which even left him slightly intrigued. He temporarily suppressed this thought and planned on paying the Chan Monastery of Devanaga a visit first. He considered who he should send to protect the two disciples of the School of Medicine. Please wait here for a moment and wait for the king to send someone over. In a small garden in the king's estate, the caretaker's attitude clearly became much more polite. Yes, said Hua Ci. Congratulations, master. Congratulations. You're going to become an honored guest of the king's estate. Ru Xian clasped her hands and smiled. You could have just come. Why did you have to drag me along? Originally, Hua Ci refused to come to the king's estate with Ru Xian. Ru Xian had dragged him along. Looking at Ru Xian before him, the little girl from back then had finally grown up to the point where she could make her own decisions, and she was finally no longer trapped by hatred. He could not help but sigh with a smile. If it weren't for the sake of giving you a better life, master, why would I have come all the way here? Said Ru Xian. You've made the right decision to return, said Hua Ci. Even he had never thought a plague could save the world. I still have to help you through the second heavenly tribulation after all. Look, even someone like Qian Rongji has become a golden core cultivator. Master, you've really been wasting your time in the past few years, said Ru Xian. She's a genius like you. She's not someone an old man like me can compare to. Genius? It's just that she's suffered a lot. When Ru Xian returned to the 100 Schools of Thought to invite Hua Ci, she saw another genius who had boarded the isolated island where Qian Rongji lived. His name was Lin Xian, or Chu Tian. Right now, it was hard for her to tell if the madness of these two people had been cured, or if it had become even worse, unable to extricate themselves from it. That makes sense. Meow. Chapter 1045. The night was bleak and hazy. A dim, crescent moon flickered in and out of the dark clouds. An empty city and a forest of buildings seemed to tell of its prosperity of the past. The night breeze blew gently, scattering white paper money across the ground, drifting about in the wind from time to time. Between the eerie buildings, on a long street, a bright, black carriage drove over silently. Two glazed lanterns burned with green willow, the wisps, like gloomy eyes. However, The 4 large horses that pulled the carriage flickered in and out of sight. They did not make a single sound. The arrival of the carriage did not disturb the deathly silence of the city. Instead, it was like an underground river that flowed into a lake. The curtains were lifted, revealing a jade-like face. Ru Exen scanned the surroundings, but her expression did not change at all. She looked back and asked, "Your Highness, many people have died here, but there don't seem to be a lot of insect eggs." This was once one of the 81 prefectures of the Green Province. After the soaring locust king conquered the city, several million people died to the insects. At the same time, it became the largest insect nest in the north of the Green Province, giving birth to countless soaring locust demon generals and even demon commanders. However, after the cultivators of the Green Province slaughtered it with all their might, it had already been completely reduced to a dead city. The streets paved with limestone were not suitable for regular locusts to thrive. "There are other insects here." The Dark Queen leaned back on the couch and gently stroked the cat in her arms. The black cat lay in her arms lazily. It did not seem particularly angry, which matched her bearing. "People of the Sword Collection Palace?" Ru Exen asked casually. "Should I praise you for being clever?" The Dark Queen asked. "There's no need for that." Ru Exen smiled and let down the curtains, circulating the heavenly tome of Cloud Furnace quietly. She did not go to the trouble of trying to persuade the Dark Queen to avoid unnecessary trouble. Even if this was the north of the Green Province, the territory controlled by the Sword Collection Palace. "You really are very clever." The Dark Queen nodded slightly and lowered her head to the cat in her arms. "Xianyue, be a good girl. I'll kill 2 people from the Sword Collection Palace to avenge you." Ru Exen opened her eyes slightly, showing a hint of surprise. "Don't trouble yourself, master. The people who bullied me are already dead." Xianyue waved her tail disinterestedly. "How can they die? There's no end to the people of the Sword Collection Palace, but there will be a day when I kill them all and refine them into ghost slaves." The Dark Queen said faintly as a faint smile appeared on her pale, gloomy face. Xianyue raised her head and glanced at the Dark Queen. He curled up his body. He knew that she was not talking to him. She had been like this ever since the battle at Burial Mound Mountain. Perhaps it had been like this before, which was why she wanted to leave this comfortable place. To the distant Dragon Province. Meow. Then let's kill them. However, she no longer wanted to go to the Dragon Province. He thought to himself, "I also want to avenge Big Black. Dragon King of the Sea, just you wait. How dare you kill my Big Black? I won't let you off." This belief was so hopeless, yet so resolute. The further the carriage traveled towards the center of the city, the more damaged the surrounding structures became. Buildings collapsed one by one, basically reduced to ruins. In the very center of the ruins, a man paced back and forth. He wore green clothes and held a broken sword. His expression was lonely. Nearby, a woman in violet sat on the eaves of a half-collapsed hall. She leaned on her hand as she gazed at the changing clouds in a daze. She was not a supreme beauty, but she possessed a thriving sense of vitality. Even the gloomy night and the miserable ruins were unable to influence her at all. Instead, it fueled the hope in her eyes. The man in green raised his head and saw her. His face warmed up. "Zijin, let's go back." "All right," Yu Zijin replied and leapt off the eaves. "Did you find anything, senior brother?" "The green ruin's sword intent is far too profound. I'll probably need another century before I can completely comprehend it." Fu Qingjin was slightly doubtful. Ever since the green ruin's sword broke, his cultivation in the past few years had been extremely smooth. He had even undergone the second heavenly tribulation, but ever since this year he always felt like something was amiss when he comprehended the green ruin's sword intent, as if he was missing something. That was why he was searching for inspiration in the ruins. "All right. When the time comes, we'll fuse the 2 swords and kill off all the monsters like the soaring Locust King." Yu Zijian's eyes shone brightly. Her killing intent was pure and clear. "You can't kill them all." Fu Qingjin shook his head gently. No matter how hard he worked, ruins like this would always appear. No matter how glorious a structure was, there would be a time when it collapsed. Blindly trying to protect it was just asking for troubles. Even if there were no demons that devoured or killed the thousands of lives, they would still die in the end. What did the so-called good and evil matter? I have to kill them all even if I can't. Yu Zijin was stubborn. Where do you want to go? I'll go with you. Fu Qingjin was confused as to why he would have such thoughts of confusing good and evil. Had he been too deeply influenced by the Green Ruin's sword intent? However, after the Green Ruin's sword broke, the influence of the previous masters of the Green Ruin's sword had been eliminated. All of his thoughts should have originated from his own heart. Thank you, senior brother. I also have to work hard on cultivation so that I can fuse the two swords with you as soon as possible, said Yu Zijin. Fu Qingjin looked into her eyes. A bright violet flowed through them. Yu Zijin asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Fu Qingjin shifted his gaze away first and shook his head. The green ruins and violet clouds were yin and yang. When one sword appeared, the other would definitely follow closely behind. Most sword masters were lovers. However, the strange thing was that they had spent so many years together. Their tacit understanding was already extremely deep, yet they did not develop any feelings for each other. Let's return to the Sword Collection Palace. The crescent moon burst out of the clouds, illuminating the entire city with clear light. Right when the two streaks of light were about to tear through the air, a ghostly figure suddenly rose up, rapidly spreading across the ruins of the city. Fu Qingjin suddenly looked back, only to see a huge ghost claw swinging down viciously. He was unable to dodge it. Boom! It was like a clap of thunder. The ground shook violently, and countless ruins collapsed. A mountainous ghost stood in the ruins, slamming its hand against the ground. It happened to be the void-bellied Ghost King. The carriage stopped quietly beneath the huge ghost's feet, and the Dark Queen disembarked. The green ruins and violet clouds. I never thought there would be two big fish. The void-bellied Ghost King's fingers shone with a mixture of azure and violet light. Fu Qingjin and Yu Zijin crossed their swords, forming an illusory domain. A purple building vaguely appeared on the green ruins. The azure was heavy, while the violet was faint. However, they managed to block the Dark Queen's fatal strike together. Dark Queen, how can a great cultivator behave in such a despicable manner? Fu Qingjin said. Not only was she bullying the weak, but she even used a sneak attack like this. Damned insect? The Dark Queen was filled with disgust. She could not be bothered with arguing. The void-bellied Ghost King pressed down with another huge hand, and the azure and violet illusion immediately approached shattering. Do you really want to declare war against the Sword Collection Palace? Fu Qingjin asked. I just want to crush you to death, said the Dark Queen. Your Highness, this probably won't assist us in dealing with the soaring Locust King. Ruexen also disembarked from the carriage. Ruexen, I praised you earlier for being smart. Don't be stupid, Piao Tianxue said. Chapter 1046. The Dark Queen glanced at her indifferently, and Ruexen immediately felt a heavy sense of danger. The woman before her was extremely dangerous. Demonic cultivators never cared about reason. Some of them could even ignore the pros and cons, acting based on their moods. The Dark Queen clearly belonged to this group. Do as you please. Ruexen returned to the carriage, but she silently crushed a jade talisman in her sleeve. The Dark Queen sensed something and squinted her eyes slightly. Then she turned around and looked at the void-bellied Ghost King's subordinates, Fu Qingjin and Yu Zijin. She was asking if she really wanted to declare war against the Sword Collection Palace. Exactly what she wanted was to declare war against the Sword Collection Palace. She was not like how she seemed, acting completely based on her moods. Instead, she had already predicted the outcome a long time ago. However, this was an even deeper form of fearlessness. Even if she had to stake the Umbral Insect's legacy, she wanted to fulfill what she had said and kill everyone from the Sword Collection Palace. Senior brother, I can't hold on much longer. You better find a way to escape. Yu Zijian's sword-wielding hand trembled slightly. As a Foundation Establishment cultivator, just resisting the void-bellied Ghost King's aura had already drained all of her concentration. If she had not worked with Fu Qingjin, she would not have lasted even a second. Hold on a little longer. Reinforcements will arrive very soon. Fu Qingjin tossed out a violet talisman with a wave of his hand. A resplendent streak of light pierced through the ghost claw and shot towards the Dark Queen. The ruins and ground along the way were sliced open gently like thin paper. Even the hazy moonlight and the hazy night wind were no exception. The strike was like the full-powered strike of a great sword cultivator. However, under the Dark Queen's indifferent gaze, the streak of light began to distort and dim before it had even approached 300 meters away, vanishing into the night in the blink of an eye. She continued to stroke the cat. She had sealed up the region a long time ago. If she still failed to kill 2 juniors, it would be a waste of her cultivation. Fu Qingjin frowned firmly. Violet talismans were extremely precious, equivalent to a single strike from a great cultivator, but against another great cultivator, its effects were extremely limited, not to mention that he had been ambushed. Was he really going to die here tonight? He was not afraid of death, but he wanted to protect the woman beside him. Senior brother, it's all right. Yu Zijian smiled with difficulty. The light in her eyes continued to flicker. Actually, I knew there were endless monsters in the world, and I knew I would die to monsters sooner or later. I just never thought it would be so soon. You better go. Fu Qingjin pursed his lips and did not answer. He activated the purple talismans and transformed them into streaks of sword light, lightning, and flames. However, he was unable to block the void-bellied Ghost King's gigantic palm. Yu Zijian looked at Fu Qingjin and opened her mouth, but she did not try to persuade him any further. Instead, she smiled. Then let's just die together. However, I don't want my soul to end up in the hands of the Umbral Een sect. I won't, Fu Qingjin said. In an instant, the faint purple pavilion collapsed, leaving behind only the green ruins illusion. The last purple talisman burned out. The Dark Queen said, struggling at death's door. There are so many old friends tonight. An emotional voice suddenly rang out. In the beginning, it was still beyond the clouds, but by the time it reached the last word, it had already arrived. Li Qingshan made his way over from between the ruins and stepped into the sealed region. He clasped his hands. I am Li Qingshan. Greetings, Your Highness. Then he glanced at the cat in her arms deeply and could not help but smile resplendently, revealing his pure white teeth. Xuanyue's ears perked up as she stared at Li Qingshan with her cat eyes. Her gaze was filled with confusion. She just found it to be slightly familiar. Is this the reinforcements you've called in? The Dark Queen ignored Li Qingshan and looked at the carriage behind her. He's always been a busybody. Ru Exen lifted the curtains and smiled. Not just anyone can stick their nose into my business. Li Qingshan, do you think I'm afraid to kill you just because you're the unraging monk's disciple? Li Qingshan. Fu Qingjin's heart skipped a beat. He still remembered this name clearly, while a gleam of interest flashed through Yu Zijian's eyes. She said silently, Niu Juxia. Your Highness, don't listen to this woman's nonsense. I'm not being a busybody. I'm still a guest elder of the Sword Collection Palace after all. If a disciple of the Sword Collection Palace is in trouble, I obviously have to lend a hand. Alright, you can smack that Fu guy to death. You can even leave the woman to me. If you don't mind, there's also the cat in my arms. I just happen to be lacking a pet. Even the Dark Queen was taken aback by what Li Qingshan said. She never thought he would be so bold. Only when the cat in her arms meowed furiously did she return to her senses. Her face immediately sank. Even if the unraging monk was here, he wouldn't be bold enough to speak to me like that. I think I've said it before. I'm Li Qingshan. Senior brother, looks like we won't be dying today. Yu Zijian smiled. He specifically said he wanted me dead. Fu Qingjin smiled bitterly. She had always been so optimistic, but the disparity in strength was so great. What use was a life-saving straw like that? Of course, she could keep the Sword Collection Palace busy until reinforcements arrived, but was that even possible? He's just joking. You don't have to take it seriously, senior brother, said Yu Zijian. Are you very familiar with him? Fu Qingjin glanced at her deeply. Yu Zijian nodded slightly. She did not deny it. All right, Li Qingshan. I'll kill them first, and then I'll teach you a lesson. The Dark Queen waved her hand, and the void-bellied Ghost King opened its huge, pitch-black mouth, trying to swallow Fu Qingjin and Yu Zijin. Like a whale sucking in water, black wind immediately surged, and Yu Zijin was launched into the air uncontrollably. Fu Qingjin grabbed her hand firmly, but his feet left the ground as well. He had run out of spiritual qi after holding on for so long. Give me some face. Li Qingshan extended his hand from afar, and surging demon qi condensed into a black, muscular arm. It extended its fingers and grabbed the void-bellied Ghost King's head from the front. The void-bellied Ghost King roared out furiously, but it was unable to break free from the black demonic claw. The surging black wind halted. A demon king. The Dark Queen shivered inside. Her sunken face was filled with surprise. Don't talk nonsense. I'm a Buddhist disciple. Li Qingshan pushed his hand forward, and the mountainous void-bellied Ghost King was launched far away, smashing through countless structures. He turned around and arrived before Fu Qingjin and Yu Zijin. He smiled. Zijin, long time no see, and Kid Fu too. Fu Qingjin was stunned as well. When he first met Li Qingshan, he was only a foundation establishment cultivator. In just a few short decades, he had actually gained such strength. It was truly unbelievable, and the power that belonged to the demon domain filled him with fear. On the other hand, Yu Zijin was not surprised at all, whether it was Li Qingshan's strength or the Demon King's abilities. She smiled. It really has been a long time. I heard you returned from the Mist Province. If you still hadn't come to the Sword Collection Palace, I would have gone to the Clear River Prefecture to look for you. The Dark Queen said furiously, Li Qingshan, do you really think you can stop me with these abilities? I'm not bold enough to clash with Her Highness the Dark Queen, but this is the territory of the Sword Collection Palace after all. I'd advise you to leave. Chapter 1047. The Dark Queen's eyes narrowed, but there was not the slightest hint of fear or hesitation. Instead, there was unforgettable resentment. Ming concubine. Like a streak of light, the sword pierced through the clouds. When it arrived above the city, it suddenly paused and turned into a woman. The woman wore a simple set of palace clothes, beautiful and noble, but she had a pair of firm, straight eyebrows. She called out coldly, Dark Queen, how dare you behave atrociously in the north? I won't spare you today. One sword into 10,000 swords. With a casual swing, she produced a glorious streak of light, which suddenly split into thousands of swords of light in the air, falling down like a storm. Ghost domain of the netherworld. The Dark Queen took a step forward. Her wide sleeve drifted about, and ghastly ghost chi immediately rose up from the ruins, forming a sinister domain of ghosts. Vicious ghost faces received the rain of swords. With a flash, Li Qingshan grabbed Ru Xian and Yu Zijin by the shoulders and took them away from the battlefield. They arrived on a tall building in the distance. Streaks of light landed in the ghost domain, kicking up ripples. The streaks of light were devoured and melted by the ghost chi, while the ghost chi was dispersed by the streaks of light. One yin and one yang, one tough and one soft, they seemed like natural enemies. There were no violent booms or collisions. There were only heavy explosions in the air, immediately enveloping the city in a storm. Countless ruins were swept into the air before being ground to smithereens again. The dark clouds in the sky dispersed, and the crescent moon shone dimly. It was like a slightly closed eye, coldly watching the hysterical hatred the two women felt towards each other. Why didn't you save senior brother Fu? Yu Zijin asked. Because I only have 2 hands. Li Qingshan raised his hands, expressing his powerlessness. He was not some good person who repaid evil with kindness. How much trouble had Fu Qingjin caused him? Nothing could be better than his death. Most importantly, he could restrain the Ming concubine and allow the Dark Queen to retreat calmly. However, the development of the matter exceeded his expectations. The Dark Queen had no intentions of retreating. Instead, she summoned a few more vicious ghost kings, charging towards the Ming concubine on gloomy ghost flames. She wanted to fight to the death. Fu Qingjin powered the green ruin sword as hard as he could, fusing with the sword and turning into a streak of green light. He rushed out of the battlefield. The Dark Queen's figure suddenly appeared before him. She extended a beautiful, pale white hand and grabbed the streak of light. Die. Fu Qingjin felt like he was suffocating, even though he hadn't needed to breathe to maintain his life many years ago. But Xiao Mei's hand was even more terrifying than the Ghost King's ghost claw. A bone-chilling cold spread out from it. His soul was also frozen, and he could no longer maintain the state of being one with the sword. Bitch, don't you dare harm the disciples of my sword collection palace. The sky was suddenly illuminated. The sword shone with white light, forcing back the Ghost Kings. Ming Fei and her sword alone killed their way into the gloomy domain of ghosts. She pointed the sword right at the Dark Queen. The edge of the sword trembled, taking the initiative. The Dark Queen turned around with composure and sneered. Sure enough, you've come. She held a small banner in her hand and waved it at concubine Ming. At that instant, the cries of 10,000 ghosts echoed across the heavens and earth. Myriad Ghost Banner. Ming Fei raised an eyebrow. The sword in her hand trembled violently, but it had already lost its original rhythm as if it was about to fly out of her hand. The Myriad Ghost Banner was the treasure of the Umbral Een sect. It refined far more than 10,000 ghosts, but hundreds of thousands, gathering countless vengeful spirits and evil ghosts. The resentment and ghost chi were so heavy that it could change the color of the world and make the sun and moon dim. Although the Dark Queen had spared Fu Qingjin gently, he still felt a rumble in his head. His sea of consciousness felt like it was about to shatter and explode. Immediately, he was separated from his sword, and he spurted out a mouthful of blood. He turned black in the air and flew far away. Senior brother! Yu Zijian cried out. She wanted to fly towards Fu Qingjin, but the cries of ghosts irritated her. She knelt on one knee. Her cultivation was far too weak. Even when she was affected by the shockwaves from afar, it was still rather difficult for her to endure. Li Qingshan released a ring of demon qi, blocking out the cries of ghosts. However, the building beneath his feet collapsed and collapsed. Fu Qingjin landed on the ground, unconscious. However, his body trembled as the gloomy ghost qi corroded him violently. He was close to death. What a nice sight! Li Qingshan shaded his eyes and watched on leisurely. He did not have a particularly good impression of either side. The only one he cared about was Xianyue, but who knew where the Dark Queen had shoved her away? She had vanished, so she should not be in any danger. Suddenly, he felt his wrist tighten. Yu Zijian grabbed his arm firmly and lowered her head. Niu Juxia, I know my senior brother has been very bad to you, but I beg you, save him. Originally, Li Qingshan did not want to do anything, but when he heard the name Niu Juxia, he could not help but think, even if this kid Fu survives, he's basically crippled. I've basically avenged myself, so saving him won't be a problem. It's about time I separate these two women. Look after her, he told Ru Exin before leaping over to the edge of the battlefield. He lifted up the unconscious Fu Qingjin with one hand and fiddled around with the Green Ruins sword with the other. Sure enough, the sword dimmed, and Fu Qingjin's vitality became extremely feeble. Li Qingshan dug his ear with his pinky. He found the cries of ghosts to be rather noisy, but he suddenly heard something. A cold light flashed through his eyes, and he looked over. The others were already like that, while Ming Fei, who bore the brunt of it, felt extremely pressured. She gritted her teeth secretly. This ghost bitch has actually obtained the Myriad Ghost Banner. She still wants to deal with me. She swung her sword and assumed a defensive posture. Snow-white light blocked the cries of ghosts. The Dark Queen stabbed the Myriad Ghost Banner into the ground. The Nether Ghost domain that was on the brink of collapse immediately condensed, sealing up the region. A few Ghost Kings descended from above and surrounded Ming Fei. Bitch, return my child's life. The Dark Queen's gloomy voice pierced through the cries of ghosts, like a golden thread on a white cloth, clear and deep. Who knows how your child died? Moreover, I've always thought you liked dead ghosts. Ming Fei sneered. Before the Dark Queen could say anything, A voice as cold as steel cut in, asking Ming Fei, "What did you say?" "For you." Ming Fei was slightly surprised. She was rather confused about Li Qingshan's origins. He saved Yu Zijian, so he could be regarded as a friend, but he purposefully left Fu Qingjin alone. Only when he was almost killed did he appear, and now he was questioning her again. "You don't need to know who I am. I only want to ask you one thing. Did you kill her child?" Li Qingshan arrived between them and clenched his fist as he questioned her. "Go away. This has nothing to do with you." The Dark Queen was worried that Li Qingshan would come to restrain her again. The strength he had demonstrated just now was enough to disrupt her plans. "Foolish woman, do you really think you can kill her? She's clearly using herself as bait. Do you really want to die here?" Li Qingshan turned around and cursed. He could tell a long time ago that Ming Fei's cultivation surpassed the Dark Queen's. Even with the myriad ghost banner, it was impossible for her to kill her so easily. The reason why she appeared so weak, even purposefully angering the Dark Queen, was to keep her busy here. The Dark Queen and Ming Fei's faces both changed. Drifting astronomy. Chapter 1048. Answer me. Li Qingshan clenched his fist firmly. Killing intent was contained within him. The Dark Queen did not have the ability to kill Ming Fei, but he did. As long as Ming Fei was bold enough to nod and admit it, he would be bold enough to kill her immediately. Who cared if it was the King Chu's estate or the Sword Collection Palace? That was his sore spot. "It has nothing to do with me," Ming Fei said proudly. "Liar," the Dark Queen said. The Ghost Kings roared out and lunged towards Ming Fei. "Die, bitch." Ming Fei swung her sword to receive him. Light coiled around her as she clashed with the Ghost Kings. She did not show any weakness at all. At this moment, two magnificent streaks of light rushed out from the horizon, as if they were proving Li Qingshan's words. The Dark Queen furrowed her brows and wanted to retreat, but Ming Fei did not spare her. She was determined to kill this mortal enemy of hers. Li Qingshan stood in the center of the battlefield. His long hair drifted about in the violent wind. He unclenched his fist and lowered his head in thought. He took out an item from his bosom. It was a curved horn. It was the Xieji's horn that had once almost forced him into dire straits several decades ago. It possessed the wondrous ability to distinguish between truth and lies. He had found it in Fu Qingjin's Sumeru ring. The Xieji's horn did not respond to Ming Fei's words. Of course, perhaps Ming Fei possessed a method to fool the Xieji's horn, but even if Li Qingshan used his senses to judge, Ming Fei did not seem to be lying. Although the Dark Queen was so certain that Ming Fei was the culprit, she seemed more like a stubborn mother who had lost her beloved son. She was not particularly convincing. And if she really did possess concrete evidence, he believed that Chu Lai King would not turn a blind eye to it, turning it into an unresolved case. There were still many doubtful points. For example, the witch in the Crouching Ox village practiced the profound Yin ghost control technique and not the sword manipulation technique of the Sword Collection Palace. As it seemed now, the witch was basically no more powerful than a mortal, so how could she refine little An's soul into a ghost slave? All kinds of questions emerged in his mind. Li Qingshan shook his head and put the Xieji horn back into his arms. Since Little An was not sure who the murderer was, he did not want to act recklessly like a reckless man. He would investigate slowly. But no matter who the murderer was, Li Qingshan was prepared to kill his entire family. Raising his head again, the Dark Queen was entangled by the Ming concubine, unable to break free for a moment. The two tremendous streaks of light on the horizon flanked the Dark Queen from the left and right. With the three great sword cultivators working together, they were confident they could make the Dark Queen die here. Battle demon possession, Li Qingshan said in a low voice. His demon heart flashed and the war demon totem imprinted on his back swelled and blurred. It spread and circulated until it covered his entire body and merged with him as one. He had transformed into the war demon. Immediately, demon chi rushed into the air. Li Qingshan leapt up and used his fingers like a blade, cutting down on the edge of the Ming concubine's sword. He had already used the blade style he had learned from the wildflower blade soul, which happened to destroy the Ming concubine's attack. The Dark Queen used this opportunity to flee into the distance. She stared at Li Qingshan and was rather confused. This man called himself an elder of the Sword Collection Palace. He had saved a disciple of the Sword Collection Palace first, yet he was helping her now. She was left scratching her head. "Brat, you're looking to die." The Ming concubine flew into a rage. Her sword moved violently like the tide, as sharp as lightning. Li Qingshan swung his palm with composure, dealing with the attacks as they came. He did not lose the upper hand at all. He said to the Dark Queen, "You can go." Although he did not exactly have a good impression of her or respect for her, she was little Anne's mother after all. Li Qingshan obviously would not allow her to die here. The Dark Queen turned around and drifted away. The two streaks of light pursued for over 500 kilometers before giving up on turning back in the end. One of them was a tall, middle-aged man. He stood like a lone mountain with a sword in hand. His bearing even surpassed the Ming concubines. He was the strongest sword cultivator Li Qingshan had ever seen in his life. The other was much younger. His appearance was rather similar to the Ming concubines. He wore a set of faint yellow blade master clothes, and his bearing was radiant like a prodigy. Together with the Ming concubine, he sealed off Li Qingshan's path of retreat. "You can die in his place." With a flash, the Ming concubine pulled back and stared at Li Qingshan coldly. The three great sword cultivators fell into a sword formation and surrounded Li Qingshan, brimming with killing intent. "I've saved your disciple after all. Do you really have to treat me like an enemy?" Li Qingshan laid out his hands with a smile. In the current world, basically no one could force him into dire straits anymore. Even the Dragon King of the Sea was not confident about that. However, it seemed like he could not take advantage of the Sword Collection Palace anymore. "You've come from the demon domain?" The master of the Sword Collection Palace stared at Li Qingshan. From the surging demon chi he gave off, he was clearly a demon king, and he was even more powerful than regular demon kings. Unless the demon domain invaded on a large scale, demon kings would always remain in their demon caverns. They would never roam the world. "No, I'm a disciple of Buddhism, as well as a guest elder of the Sword Collection Palace." Li Qingshan shrugged. "Nonsense." The Ming concubine rebuked furiously. Being a disciple of Buddhism was already laughable enough. The Sword Collection Palace did not even have an elder like that. However, the master of the Sword Collection Palace thought of something. A gleam of light flashed through his eyes. "You're Li Qingshan." "It's rare for someone to know my name," said Li Qingshan. "You're Li Qingshan." The young man was surprised. "How do you prove it?" "Palace Master, he really is Li Qingshan. He even saved us earlier." Yu Zijian brought the unconscious Fu Qingjin over. "Zijian, don't come over." Ming concubine called out. "Yes, but he has no ill intentions. First senior brother, hurry up and save senior brother Fu." Yu Zijian stopped and pleaded with the young man. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. Another first senior brother, and he was the first senior brother of the Sword Collection Palace. "Zijian, don't worry. Palace Master, Mother, Qingjin's life is more important," Ji Xuanri said. Not only was he the first senior brother of the Sword Collection Palace, but he was also the first prodigy among the younger generation of the Green Province to undergo the third heavenly tribulation. He was also the son of Chu Lai King and Ming Concubine, the human crown prince of the Green Province. If nothing unexpected happened, he would become the next King Chu, a true prodigy. The Chan Monastery of Devanaga can actually accept a disciple like you? The master of the Sword Collection Palace waved his hand and produced a streak of light, shooting into Fu Qingjin's body and immediately forcing out the ghastly qi. The dauntless abbot said, "I possess a great Buddhist nature," said Li Qingshan. "Just why have you come?" "I'm a guest elder of the Sword Collection Palace." "The Sword Collection Palace still owes me a sword," said Li Qingshan. "Since you're a guest elder, why are you helping the Umbral insect?" asked the master of the Sword Collection Palace. "What I hate the most in my life is bullying the weak and outnumbering the weak, so I couldn't help but stand up for the weak. As for the Umbral sect or the Sword Collection Palace, I didn't really consider it. You're a demon king, so you do know what standing up for the weak is, said the master of the sword collection palace. That's none of your business. If you don't do anything, I'll be leaving. Li Qingshan took off. Hold on. The master of the sword collection palace blocked his way in a flash. Ming Concubine and Ji Xuanri worked together, and the sword formation continued to seal up Li Qingshan, preventing him from taking another step forward. Do you really want to kill me? Li Qingshan asked. Chapter 1049. I'm a demon king. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. Even if the master of the sword collection palace wanted to kill him here, he would not find it so strange. After all, the power he used could not be tolerated by the righteous path. He might even be suspected of colluding with the demon domain, and he had even ruined Ming Fei's plans. If the master of the sword collection palace did not fall out with him, then so be it, but he even allowed him to take a sword. Wasn't that a little too generous? Was there some scheme involved? Since even the Chan monastery of Devanaga believes you possess a Buddhist nature, it's not the sword collection palace's turn to clean you up. Our sword collection palace always keeps our promises. Since we've agreed to give you a sword, come and take one. What if I don't want to go? Li Qingshan asked. That's up to you. The master of the sword collection palace moved away and waved his hand, expressing that he could leave as he pleased. Ming Fei and Ji Xuanri exchanged glances and stowed their swords away. Since the palace master is so sincere, I'd seem arrogant if I don't go. Let's go. Li Qingshan smiled. No matter what scheme was involved, he was confident he could destroy it with force. Even if it was a tiger's den, he would still venture into it. You really do have some courage, the master of the sword collection palace said. He had not seen the slightest hint of fear in Li Qingshan the entire time. Do you think the palace master will harm me? Li Qingshan said. They made their way north together. Ji Xuanri and Ming Fei took Yu Zijin and Fu Qingjin with them, while Li Qingshan and the master of the sword collection palace flew together. The streak of light was extremely fast, leaving Li Qingshan behind very soon. Li Qingshan smiled. He had no intentions of chasing after them. A while later, Li Qingshan arrived before the renowned sword collection peak. A lone peak hovered in the sky, piercing through the sea of clouds like a lone island. The Chan monastery of Devanaga's Great Buddha Mountain was renowned for its resemblance to a great Buddha, while the sword collection peak was like a supreme sword. The isolated peaks below were like swords, currently bowing towards the sword in the sky. Between the hidden sword peak and the other peaks below, there was an iron chain that was as large as a horned dragon. It was as if once the iron chain was broken, the divine sword would break through the air and fly away. Li Qingshan thought, the mountain forms the force, and the force forms the formation. The protective formation of the sword collection palace is anything but ordinary. If I enter it and the palace master suddenly turns against me, it won't be much safer than venturing into the ink sea. Please. The palace master raised his hand. All right. The sword collection palace did not have a flight ban like the Chan monastery of Devanaga. The Chan monastery of Devanaga was filled with Buddhist statues and pagodas, so Buddhist disciples obviously could not fly above senior monks, bodhisattvas, or Buddhas. For a sword cultivator, flying on a sword was the most basic of basics. There were sword lights flying between the peaks. Some of them formed sword formations, some of them fought one-on-one, and some of them flew alone. They practiced the art of sword kinesis and roamed between the mountains and the sea of clouds. They really had the aura of sword immortals. The palace master invited Li Qingshan onto the heavens-leaning peak. In the majestic hall of the sword palace, he ordered, "Summon the sword masters of the various peaks. Immediately prepare for the sword selection ceremony." Li Qingshan gazed out of the hall. The lone sword-like peaks suddenly lit up with light of various colors. The light rapidly extended along the iron chain and reached the hidden sword peak. At that moment, Li Qingshan heard a strange hum. It was heavy, yet it also possessed a soaring clarity, enough to make even his soul tremble. The hidden sword peak was activated. A streak of light rushed into the air, shattering all the clouds in the sky. The stars were vast, and the moonlight was boundless. They all seemed to spin, dazzling. All the disciples of the Sword Collection Palace stopped what they were doing, raising their heads and gazing at this sight. Their expressions were no different from the disciples of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga during the Dharma Assembly of Zen. What a detestable sound! Li Qingjin, where the hell have you come to? The Wildflower Blade Soul's voice suddenly rang out in Li Qingshan's head. In order to prevent the Wildflower Blade Soul from rambling and drawing hatred to him, he had always placed the Wildflower Blade in the Azura field. However, their minds were still connected. Just now, Li Qingshan withdrew his gaze and answered in surprise, "You sensed it. I hate swords the most. Cut that damn sword in half." The Wildflower Blade Soul ordered. "That's not a single sword." Li Qingshan glanced at the Sword Collection Palace. There were many swords stuck in it. The wondrous sound probably came from all the swords ringing together. "Really? Then cut them all." The Wildflower Blade Soul said impatiently. "Don't. I still have one in there." Li Qingshan was not that bored. "What? You want to use a sword? You're bold enough to use a sword?" The Wildflower Blade Soul suddenly lost his temper. Blade intent rushed into Li Qingshan's sea of consciousness, kicking up surging waves. "You've lost your mind." Li Qingshan suppressed it with the Spirit Turtle's method of sea suppression in a hurry. "You already have me. You're not allowed to use any other weapons, much less swords. Those who use swords are all hypocrites. I'll kill every single one I see." The Wildflower Blade Soul said furiously. "Ha, that's a sharp one. Not only are you a hypocrite, but you're also a poser. Apart from my little Anne." Li Qingshan had completely forgotten that he had also used a sword in the past. "Don't worry. I'm only drawing a sword. I don't know how to use it. Don't say I didn't warn you. If you refine any other sword, we'll be on our own." "Why are you laughing, fellow?" All the master of the Sword Collection Palace saw was Li Qingshan's mysterious smile. "Nothing. I'm just excited to see something like this." Li Qingshan looked at the master of the Sword Collection Palace. If it really was like what the Wildflower Blade Soul had said, then this person was the greatest hypocrite and poser. As they spoke, the sword masters and elders of the various peaks arrived in the hall. One of them cried out in surprise and joy, "Li Qingyan!" Li Qingshan glanced past them. The speaker was a handsome man, also at the second heavenly tribulation. He must have been a sword master of some peak. Even the joy on his face was unable to wash away his melancholy. Li Qingshan found him rather familiar, but he was unable to recall his name. "You're Yin Xiaoqiu? You've come at a perfect time. Are you bold enough to fight me again?" Yin Xiaoqiu's face turned cold, and he gripped the Waterbreaker sword on his waist firmly. All these years of arduous cultivation had been for this moment. If it were not for the fact that Li Qingshan had gone to the Mist Province, he would have gone to challenge him a long time ago. "Oh, it's you." Only then did Li Qingshan remember that he had defeated Yin Xiaoqiu's Waterbreaker sword with the Water Sword in the past, which basically made him famous in the Clear River Prefecture. "Since you've come, why bother putting on an act?" Yin Xiaoqiu was certain that Li Qingshan was purposefully humiliating him by not being able to call out his name, but Li Qingshan had gone through so many years of continuous battles. Who knew how many existences at the third heavenly tribulation he had even killed, lingering on the brink of death so many times? So how could a clash between Foundation establishment cultivators in the past leave any deep impression on him? At the very least, Fu Qingjin still posed a great threat to him, but Yin Xiaoqiu had been defeated by him in a single strike, having been worn away by the passage of time a long time ago. Putting on an act. Li Qingshan swore inside, "It's not like I'm using a sword right now." "Xiaoqiu, stop messing around." The master of the Sword Collection Palace said. "Palace Master, please allow me to spar with the sword against elderly." Chapter 1050. Li Qingshan sniggered and stood with his arms crossed. Yin Xiaoqiu sure had an unlucky name. He always chose to challenge him when he was at his most powerful. It was impossible for him not to worry. His behavior only made the sword masters and elders of the Sword Collection Palace even more furious. They said together, "Please grant us your permission, Palace Master." The master of the Sword Collection Palace frowned slightly, while Ming Fei and Ji Xuanri looked at one another. They had all witnessed Li Qingshan's strength. Yin Xiaoqiu had no chance of victory at all. However, if they just said that, Yin Xiaoqiu would definitely be unwilling to accept it, and the others would not accept it either. However, if they allowed Li Qingshan to use the methods of the Demon King here, there would be a lot of trouble. After a moment of thought, the master of the Sword Collection Palace nodded. "Thank you, Palace Master." Yin Xiaoqiu clasped his hands and turned to look at Li Qingshan. "Then I'll lose again." Li Qingshan made his way out of the hall and brushed past Yin Xiaoqiu. He arrived on the terrace in front of the hall and gazed at the Sword Collection peak in the sky. Yin Xiaoqiu followed close behind. He said to Li Qingshan's back, "If you don't have a suitable sword, you can choose one on the Sword Collection peak before you spar with me." Not only did he want to win, but he wanted to win in an upright manner. "There's no need for all the trouble." Li Qingshan turned around. "What, you still want to use the water sword?" Yin Xiaoqiu's face turned slightly cold. "No, my swordsmanship has already reached a higher realm. I don't have a sword in my hand, nor do I have a sword in my heart. Come at me." Li Qingshan brought his fingers together like a sword. All the sword cultivators frowned. Talking about a higher realm of swordsmanship in the Sword Collection Palace was basically showing off before an expert. "What, I don't have a sword in my hand, nor do I have a sword in my heart," was even more nonsense. "You're asking to be humiliated. Watch my sword." Yin Xiaoqiu bellowed out, and his various emotions diluted and dispersed, turning into a faint sense of sorrow. The breaking water sword leapt out of its sheath silently. The curved blade was like a crescent moon, flying out from the calm surface of the lake and sweeping towards Li Qingshan's throat. Water severing worries. It was like a glimpse of the world, yet it was also like an antelope hanging its horn, untraceable. All the sword cultivators gasped in admiration. As expected of the descendant of a famous sword. Even they did not dare to say that they could block the power of this sword. They could only temporarily avoid it. Meanwhile, Li Qingshan did not move. He had once exclaimed in admiration of Yin Xiaoqiu's sword will. Now, Yin Xiaoqiu's sword will was 10 times better than before. It was indeed a peerless sword technique inherited from the 10 famed swords. There was nothing wrong with the sword intent. The problem was that it was too slow and powerless. Just when all the sword cultivators thought that this sword would kill Li Qingshan on the spot, Li Qingshan stretched out his right hand. Without using any sword or saber techniques, he gently twisted his middle finger and index finger. The flying moon turned back into the blade of the sword. The blade of the sword suddenly froze and could not advance another inch. Yin Xiaoqiu's expression froze as well. He didn't even need to use his devil chi, let alone the water sword. There are always things in this world that you can't sever, such as worries, like flowing water, like me. Li Qingshan's voice was filled with a faint sigh. The feeling of showing off in front of a bunch of pretentious peddlers sure was exhilarating. All the sword cultivators were rendered speechless. How is this possible? Yin Xiaoqiu released his grip on the hilt and took a step back as he murmured to himself. To a sword cultivator, the sword was as important as his life. He had unconsciously released his grip on the hilt. Clearly, his mind was in a mess. After decades of bitter cultivation and pursuit, he had finally arrived in front of his opponent, but his opponent had actually forgotten his name. He wanted to take revenge, but he found that the distance between them had widened even further. Suddenly, he felt that everything he had done was in vain. Suddenly, a hand pressed down on his shoulder, and the palace master said, "Xiaoqiu, there's no need for you to lose heart. Fellow Li has already undergone the 3rd heavenly tribulation. You're obviously not his opponent." The 3rd heavenly tribulation. Yin Xiaoqiu cried out involuntarily, gazing at Li Qingshan in disbelief. The sword cultivators were all stunned. Undergoing the 3rd heavenly tribulation was equivalent to reaching the apex of the 9 provinces. Across the entire world, all of them were renowned figures. Just how old was the person before them, yet he had already undergone the third heavenly tribulation. What kind of cultivation speed was this? Only a few people knew about Li Qingshan undergoing the third heavenly tribulation. Even if they knew, they were unwilling to spread it, as his cultivation was far too similar to the Demon King's. And the Chan monastery of Devanaga was already prepared to hold a grand ceremony to celebrate Little, and when she was conferred the title of Monk King. They would invite all the great cultivators of the Green Province and even the fellow Buddhists from the outer sect. Li Qingshan would never receive such treatment. Li Qingshan tossed the breaking water sword back to Yin Xiaoqiu. Yin Xiaoqiu gazed at the blade, and his expression was reflected on it. After a while, he said, "I'm going back to cultivate." Afterwards, he flew off heaven's leaning peak. He did not ride on his sword. The sword cultivators were all gloomy. The palace master gazed at Yin Xiaoqiu's figure and thought, "Xiaoqiu, it's about time you understand that the greatest sorrow in the world is powerlessness. If you're powerless, then it's impossible for you to relieve your sorrow." Li Qingshan shrugged and turned around to the palace master. "Can I draw my sword now?" "Anytime, but since you're a guest elder of my sword collection palace, you must abide by the rules of my sword collection palace," said the palace master. "What rules?" "You can't use force to take it," said the palace master. "Then what should I use?" Li Qingshan answered with a question. The sword selection ceremony is not just a person choosing a sword, but a sword choosing a person too," said the palace master. "All right, I'll try my best." Li Qingshan did not think much of it. From the soaring dragon sword to the wildflower blade at the end of the road, not a single weapon had chosen him, obediently allowing him to use it. However, in the end, he still had to use it however he wanted. "I've not worked so hard to cultivate just so weapons can pick and choose. You need to seal your cultivation," said the palace master sternly. Li Qingshan was slightly taken aback. He smiled playfully. "You're making things difficult for me, palace master." Not being able to draw the best sword was a small matter, but if his cultivation was sealed, he would be at the mercy of others once the sword collection palace turned against him. "These are the rules. They're not targeting you," said the palace master. Those who could draw their swords on the sword collection peak were all disciples who had just undergone the first heavenly tribulation. Not only did they have the right, but they were also not powerful enough to contend against the sword collection peak. They could only choose their swords based on their luck. However, at Li Qingshan's level of strength, he could ignore his heart and draw his sword with force. "Since you've said that, then that's fine." Li Qingshan spread his arms and said calmly, "Please seal my cultivation, palace master." The palace master walked over and pressed his fingers together like a sword, immediately tapping all of Li Qingshan's major acupoints. With each tap, a strand of sword chi would flow in, and the dense demon chi would withdraw slightly. When it was forced back into the demon heart, it had already been enveloped by layers of sword chi. It was difficult for Li Qingshan to use all of his human cultivation, but the palace master only needed a single thought to trigger the sword chi and destroy his demon heart. Li Qingshan looked at the master of the sword collection palace before him with a smile. There were some things that could not be sealed. That was his greatest power. He only needed a single thought to suppress the sword chi. Even if he became slightly injured, it would not be a big deal. Chapter 1051. Their eyes met. One's gaze was deep, while the other's was clear. Both of them were tall and straight. As they stood facing each other, they were basically equal. There was also an indescribable flow of qi, like the mountain breeze that echoed between the peaks. "You can go now," said the palace master. "All right," Li Qingshan thought, "didn't you want to fight here?" After arriving at the main hall, there was an almost straight metal chain that connected to the hidden sword peak in the sky. Li Qingshan glanced upwards and leapt onto the chain, beginning his climb with all his might. Everyone watched as Li Qingshan's figure continued to rise. As he leapt, he was like a tiger climbing a mountain, arriving at the bottom of the hidden sword peak. Li Qingshan glanced down. Everyone was already as tiny as a mustard seed. When he looked up again, at such a close distance, The hidden sword peak did not seem much different from any other mountain. Greenery and vines coiled around the rock. However, basically every rock was stabbed with a sword. There were thousands of them, making for a rather spectacular sight. However, the swords were all sealed in a layer of rust, making it impossible to tell the material of the sword. One had to make a choice based on instinct, and if the sword did not choose its owner, it was impossible to pull it out by force. Everyone wanted to know what kind of sword he would pull out. I want the strongest sword. Li Qingshan leapt onto the hidden sword peak without any hesitation. Even if he had already given up on the path of the sword, the stronger the weapon, the better. He could still sacrifice it if he did not use it. He could not help but think of something. If he sacrificed all the swords on the hidden sword peak on the Azura altar of armaments, he wondered what kind of Azura weapon he would obtain. However, he could only think about it for now. The Azura altar of armaments also needed to test the strength of the sacrificer. The end-blossoming blade was already the most powerful weapon he could wield right now. Discarding these stray thoughts, Li Qingshan began searching through the sword collection peak. Although the master of the sword collection palace had sealed up his demon heart, his strength of the ox demon could not be sealed up. He was confident he could draw out any sword on the sword collection peak. What mattered was how he could find the strongest sword. He climbed up and down. He seemed like he was focused on searching for the sword, gripping the rusty hilt from time to time before releasing it again. Actually, he was secretly practicing the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to derive it. On a platform at the foot of Sky-Leaning Peak, a group of outer sect disciples who were only in the Qi refinement realm looked up as well. Their eyes were filled with envy and hope as they discussed among themselves softly. Who is this person? He's so powerful. You're really ignorant, haven't you heard of Li Qingshan? I heard he's not much older than us, yet he's already become a guest elder. He's even the White Hawk commander of the Hawkwolf Guard. Among the discussions, only a young man remained silent. His gaze remained locked onto Li Qingshan the entire time, without shifting at all. The outline of his bronze face was distinct. If someone looked closely, they would discover that he bore some resemblance to Li Qingshan. A short, chubby young man beside him smiled. Senior brother Xiao Yao, why were you looking at him so seriously? You're both surnamed Li, don't tell me you're relatives? How can that be? Li Xiaoyao withdrew his gaze and smiled. I do want a relative like that. Sigh, I'm the one who really wants a relative like that. It's enough for you to have Senior Uncle Hua's protection. In less than 2 years, you'll probably be able to undergo the heavenly tribulation and pull out a sword on the hidden sword peak. By then, you have to protect me. I can't protect you. Li Xiaoyao shook his head with a smile. He knew that this junior brother Tian was renowned for being straightforward, but he did not have any ulterior motives. As for the assistance that Wasungzan had provided him, there was no need to deny it. Otherwise, with his talent, it would have been impossible for him to reach the 10th layer at such a young age. Forget it, forget it. I knew you couldn't be relied on. I still have to rely on myself. Oh right, why haven't I seen Senior Uncle Hua recently? He seems to be in secluded cultivation. I heard that Senior Uncle Hua and Elder Li are good friends. Do you think that's true? I'm not sure about that. You'll have to ask Senior Uncle Hua. Li Xiaoyao actually knew that a large part of the reason why Wasungzan treated him differently was because of the man on the hidden sword peak, his second uncle. Of course, he did not possess that kind of extraordinary talent after all. After so many years, he had not even undergone a single heavenly tribulation. However, he already felt like it was enough. This was the path of a swordsman that he wanted to walk. Even if he could not reach the apex, he wanted to walk down it step by step. He thought to himself, second uncle, even if you don't acknowledge me, I'll still treat you as my second uncle. Li Qingshan sensed something and glanced down. When he saw Li Xiaoyao, he naturally felt a connection of blood. He could not help but smile. The child from back then had already grown up. By now, he had already eliminated most of the swords on the hidden sword peak. They were all spiritual and arcane artifacts. Only 23 true treasured swords remained. Although they seemed rusty to regular people, no different from other swords at all, his eyes shone brightly. He could not help but sigh inside. The heritage of the Sword Collection Palace sure runs deep. I wonder where they gathered so many treasured swords from. If you include the treasured swords that are currently in use, there'll be several dozen of them. The South Sea Sword Pavilion is also a large sect of sword cultivators, but they basically want to cry when they see the hidden sword peak. However, what came next would be rather difficult. 2 or 3 of the 10 renowned swords of the Sword Collection Palace seemed to have yet to appear, which was his target. However, how was he supposed to find those 2 or 3 renowned swords out of the 23? The hidden sword was not just a collection. It was also a seal. Li Qingshan knew very little about the 10 renowned swords of the Sword Collection Palace, so he had no idea about the names or characteristics of the remaining renowned swords. Under the circumstances where their grades were similar, even the spirit turtle would struggle to find out which sword was the renowned one. He felt rather regretful. If he had known earlier, he would have investigated a little. Making up his mind, he might as well search through them one by one. He seems to have separated the grades of the swords. Ming Fei said to the palace master with a frown. It's fine. That's his ability. The palace master was not particularly worried about the fact that Li Qingshan was about to take away a treasured sword, or even a renowned sword, from the Sword Collection Palace. That's true. Ming Fei sneered. The soaring dragon sword seems to be stuck here. Li Qingshan discovered a hole in a piece of green rock. It happened to match the shape of the soaring dragon sword. When he gazed into the depths of the hole, it was like a black eye staring back at him, but at a closer glance, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Li Qingshan shook his head. Was he imagining things? In the end, he eliminated another 6 or 7 swords. He really could not distinguish the remaining ones, so he just let it go. Whatever. They're all treasured swords anyway. It's not like I'm going to use them, so I'll just randomly pick one. Chapter 1052. It flickered extremely quickly, like a spark. If Li Qingshan had not been so focused on finding the sword, he probably would have missed it as well. He was surprised and doubtful. What's going on? Is the palace master purposefully luring me into drawing a weaker treasured sword? He could not be blamed for being so suspicious. Ever since he first set foot on the path of cultivation, the Sword Collection Palace had never been friendly to him. Even now, they were still vaguely hostile. However, upon further thought, such petty actions did not seem like the palace master's style. Although it was only a short confrontation, he always had a sharp sense of his enemies. If the palace master doesn't want me to draw the sword, why did he send me? Or does he want to kill me on the Sword Collection Peak? But there doesn't seem to be a need for that. Whatever. It's a treasured sword after all. I'll just take it. Li Qingshan flew up and grabbed the hilt. Originally, he thought he would have to use the strength of the ox demon to draw the sword, but he never thought that he would only need to use a little force to draw the sword as easily as drawing it from its sheath. With a gentle shake, the rust that covered the sword fell off. The blade was as thin as a cicada's wing, almost transparent. Bright moonlight suddenly twisted and gathered on the blade, seeping into it bit by bit. Only then did the blade gradually fill up. There was a crescent on the hilt as well. Li Qingshan raised the sword and faced the yellow moon in the sky, forming a full moon. Its soul reversal? Ji Xuanri's expression changed. He subconsciously tightened his grip on Soul Destroyer. There was a scorching sun on the hilt. Soul Reversal and Soul Destroyer both belonged to the 10 renowned swords. Although the 2 swords were not yin and yang like the Green Ruins and Violet Firmament, they still possessed the laws of yin and yang. It was said that they had been forged at the same time. They were a pair of twins, and they had a mysterious connection with each other. Don't tell me the renowned swords really do possess a spirit? Li Qingshan was surprised. Even though he had not refined it, he had tested the sword's power. Just the presence of the sword alone was enough to tell that regular treasured swords could not compare to it. It was definitely a renowned sword. His feelings were rather mixed. Originally, he wanted to cheat, but in the end, the correct answer directly jumped out. He could not help but feel regret, joy, and some disbelief. Moreover, he could feel that this famed sword did not resist him at all. He could probably refine it with a little more effort. It's probably because my charm is too great. When this sword sees me, it's like a young girl in love seeing her Mr. Right. It immediately wants to sleep with me. Amidst the exclamations of the crowd, Li Qingshan grabbed the soul-transforming sword and leaped down from Hidden Sword Peak. Boom! Li Qingshan bent his body slightly and landed in front of the hall, smashing a deep pit on the ground. Li Qingshan straightened up and said to the Palace Master, "Palace Master, you can release me now, right?" "That's impossible. You're not a sword cultivator. How could you have obtained the recognition of the soul-shifting sword? You must have used some trick." An elder angrily rebuked Li Qingshan. Yes, his cultivation was obviously sealed, but he was able to jump down from the Hidden Sword Peak without any injuries. There must be something wrong with this. Palace Master, please capture this man and investigate him in detail. A sword master also expressed his doubts. Even if it was the body-tempering arts of the school of the military, he would probably still be injured when his cultivation was completely sealed up. For a moment, the crowd was in a frenzy. They all wanted to take back the soul-transforming sword and chase Li Qingshan off the mountain. They could not be blamed for being so excited. The 10 famed swords held far too great a significance to the Sword Collection Palace. Even the elders and swordmasters could not obtain a single one, yet an outsider had suddenly taken them away. It was like their own son had been abducted. They struggled to accept it. Not to mention the fact that this outsider had always shown some respect to the Sword Collection Palace. Even when he faced the Palace Master, he stood on equal footing. How could they accept this? "Shut up," the Palace Master said sternly. The heaven-leaning peak immediately fell silent. The Palace Master said, "Li Qingshan is not an outsider. Instead, he's a guest elder of our Sword Collection Palace. There's nothing wrong with him taking the swords from Hidden Sword Peak by abiding by our rules. Since he chose the soul-transforming sword, it's also the soul-transforming sword that chose him. It's all the will of the heavens." Now that the Palace Master had spoken, no matter how unwilling the sword masters and elders were, they could only accept this outcome. Li Qingshan listened on silently. He just felt that it was rather unnatural, but he was unable to put his finger on what it was. After much thought, he came to a conclusion, which was that everything had gone a little too smoothly today. He had already grown accustomed to danger, so he was rather unaccustomed to obtaining a famed sword so easily. Moreover, the Palace Master was far too kind to him. If it was anyone else, then so be it, but the Palace Master had personally witnessed him transform into a demon. Was he not afraid that his demon chi would contaminate the famed sword? The Palace Master clasped his hands at Li Qingshan. "Congratulations. Now that you've obtained the soul-transforming sword, you'll definitely achieve great things in this era." "Thank you for your auspicious words," said Li Qingshan. Then, the Palace Master said, "You can slowly comprehend the ultimate path of the sword contained within the sword. However, in order to make better use of the soul-transforming sword, you're free to practice the various sword cultivation techniques of our Sword Collection Palace, including the sword scripture of heaven and earth." "Palace Master, you mustn't. Li Qing Elderly is only a guest elder. The sword scripture of heaven and earth is a secret of our Sword Collection Palace that cannot be passed on to outsiders. According to the rules, it cannot be passed on to a guest elder," the elder who had just rebuked Li Qingshan angrily said immediately. "Of course not. However, Elder Li has already undergone the 3rd heavenly tribulation, so you can be promoted to an honored elder. You'll have the right to read the sword scripture of heaven and earth." There was an upper minister in the king's mansion, and there was also an upper minister in the sect. The full name of the upper minister elder was the Grand Guest Elder. They had a transcendent position in the sect, but the probability of them appearing was much lower. Usually, there wouldn't be one in a few hundred years. This was because great cultivators were far too rare. Great talent and tremendous amounts of resources were often indispensable. With talent like that, they would obviously be recruited by the various large sections. There was no need for them to become some guest elder, and the resources that a guest elder could receive would never be as great as a disciple of a sect. As a result, the term honored elder had basically been forgotten by everyone, yet the palace master brought it up again. The elder, who was extremely displeased with Li Qingshan, immediately reddened. Once Li Qingshan became an honored elder, even he would have to bow to him. Just when he was about to stop him, the palace master glanced at him, and all the voices of opposition were immediately silenced. A few of them seemed to be in thought. "Elderly, what do you think?" The palace master then asked Li Qingshan. He seemed extremely amiable. "I'm obviously happy that the palace master is so fond of me. I'll definitely use this sword well." No matter how he looked at it, the palace master was trying to rope him in. However, Li Qingshan just felt that something was off, so he asked, "Palace master, you don't have any ill intentions towards me, do you?" "Definitely not." Before he had even finished speaking, the Xieji's horn in Li Qingshan's bosom suddenly lit up. The light shone through his clothes, appearing extremely eye-catching in the night. Li Qingshan and the palace master looked at each other silently. The atmosphere suddenly became rather awkward. Chapter 1053. Li Qingshan decided to say something to break the awkward atmosphere. He took out the Xieji's horn. It was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Not a single swordmaster or elder of the Sword Collection Palace did not recognize the Xieji's horn. They all knew about its ability to distinguish between truth and lies. They could not help but look at the palace master's face, and they all felt rather awkward. No matter how much hostility they felt towards Li Qingshan, having their lies exposed right in front of him was like a slap to their faces. After all, the Sword Collection Palace was still a righteous sect, and the palace master was basically equivalent to the pride of the entire Sword Collection Palace. The palace master squinted his eyes slightly, and a flash of anger seemed to flash through them. However, he immediately recovered his composure. "This Xieji's horn belongs to my Sword Collection Palace. Why is it in your hands? I borrowed it for a while." The corner of Li Qingshan's lips twitched as he held back his laughter. His stomach was already rolling with laughter. Even if the palace master would directly turn against him, he could not care less. "Can you return it to me?" the palace master asked. "Sure." Li Qingshan passed the Xieji's horn to the palace master and could not help but ask, "Palace master, does what you said earlier still count?" "Of course. This item has been around for a long time, so it's no longer as effective as before. You don't have to worry too much about it," said the palace master. "It's just a small matter. I obviously won't worry about it." Li Qingshan became even more certain that there was a scheme here, but he was unable to figure out what it was. If they wanted to harm him, just now, when his cultivation was sealed up, would be the perfect time. Even if he had hidden his strength, it would definitely be extremely dangerous if several great sword cultivators worked together with the formations of the entire Sword Collection Palace. Even he was not confident that he could escape unscathed. Just what was the master of the Sword Collection Palace planning? However, since the palace master did not turn against him, Li Qingshan was more than happy to become an honored elder. He wanted to see just what he was capable of. The next morning, the light on the Sword Collection Peak had already dispersed, and the sun shone down on the various peaks. As a result, the master of the Sword Collection Palace held a simple ceremony on Heaven's Leaning Peak, formally conferring Li Qingshan as an honored elder of the Sword Collection Palace. In the majestic palace, all the sword masters and elders, regardless of whether they were convinced or not, bowed to Li Qingshan together and greeted him, "Elder Shang-Qing." Li Qingshan crossed his arms and stood high up on the platform. He had a lazy smile on his face and the soul-rotating sword hung by his waist. The Sword Collection Palace master asked, "Does High Elder have anything to say?" Li Qingshan coughed into his fist. "Then I'll say a few words. There's no need to be so polite, fellow cultivators. Since I've become an honored elder of the Sword Collection Palace, I'll definitely do my best to serve the Sword Collection Palace. As long as the palace master gives the order, I'll go through mountains of blades and seas of fire. Of course, there may still be people here who have ill intentions towards me, but I'm sincere to you. If you don't believe me, take out the Xieji horn." The The sword masters and elders looked at one another. Their eyes were filled with anger. Not only were his words completely insincere at the beginning, but his last sentence had even touched on their sore spot. This kid was as despicable as he could get. From the corner of his eye, Li Qingshan could see that the Sword Collection Palace master's pinky finger on the Heaven's Leaning Sword was trembling slightly. If he continued to agitate him, he might just fall out and draw his sword. He could not help but chuckle. I'm just joking, just joking. Anyway, I hope we can work hard together and make the Sword Collection Palace better and better. After that, the Sword Collection Palace master could not be bothered with any more pleasantries. He directly said to Ji Xuanri, Xuanri, take Elder Shang Qin to the Pavilion of Heaven and Earth to read the Hidden Sword Manual of Heaven and Earth. Afterwards, he left with a flick of his sleeve. The elders and sword masters dispersed as well. The hall quietened down. Ji Xuanri smiled. Elderly, it's been so long since we've met, but we still haven't formally met. I'm Ji Xuanri. If you don't mind, you can just call me Xuanri. Although he spoke politely and his bearing was rather peaceful, he could not hide his pride as a prodigy. He was like the sun in the sky, always standing high up as it illuminated the world. Alright. Li Qingshan had almost killed the crown prince of the Great Xian not long ago, so why would he care about a crown prince of the Green Province? Then I won't stand on ceremony and call you Qingshan. Speaking of which, our swords are quite related. Really? What's the connection? Li Qingshan asked. Qingshan, you probably know very little about the 10 renowned swords of the Sword Collection Palace. This sword of mine is called Soul Destroyer. It was born from the same cauldron as Soul Switcher. You can say they're swords of brothers. Ji Xuanri patted the Soul Destroyer sword on his waists. Then I'm flattered. Li Qingshan smiled and asked, you must have many brothers and sisters. You're called Ji Xuanri, so is there another one called Ji Shenyue? He had already roughly understood that Little Anne's original name was Ji Shenyue, while Shenyue was a homonym given by the Dark Queen to commemorate her daughter who had passed away. Ji Xuanri thought for a moment. Let's talk as we walk. The two of them stepped out of the hall. Ji Xuanri did not fly either. He walked slowly towards Heaven Leaning Peak and said after a moment of thought, this is a private matter of my family, so it's not suitable for others to know about it. However, the private matters of the King Chu's estate are the official matters of the Green Province. Who knows how many rumors there have been a long time ago. Since you want to hear it, Qingshan, there's nothing to hide. I do have a younger sister called Shenyue, but she passed away when she was young. This is also one of my greatest regrets in my life. Ji Xuanri's expression was rather sorrowful, as if he truly felt great regret. Really? Li Qingshan gazed at it closely, but he struggled to tell the truth from the lies. He only regretted the fact that the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine did not have the Xieji transformation, which could allow him to distinguish between truth and falsehood. If he saw someone putting on an act, he would throw a punch at them. Perhaps you don't quite believe me. Although the Sword Collection Palace and the Umbral Yin sect are rather hostile, we're on very good terms. However, ever since Shenyue passed away, the Dark Queen's mind has become rather abnormal. She believes my mother is the one who caused Xuanyue's death. That's why it's better to just kill her. Li Qingshan sniggered. That's not true. Right now, the Green Province is beset with problems both internally and externally. The Locust Plague is everywhere internally, while the Mist Province poses a threat externally. It's exactly what we need the two great sects to put aside their differences and work together. If the Dark Queen hadn't provoked us and insisted on killing the disciples of our Sword Collection Palace, we wouldn't have taken the initiative. Actually, even if you hadn't stopped us, I would have spared the Dark Queen's life. Ji Xuanri's words truly possessed the bearing of the future King Chu, placing the entire Green Province in the palm of his hand. Aren't you afraid of your mother getting angry? Li Qingshan asked. This is for the overall situation of the Green Province. I believe my mother will understand. We've arrived at the Pavilion of Heaven and Earth. Ji Xuanri stopped. As he spoke, he had already arrived before a building. The building had been carved out of a mountain, standing over 300 meters tall. It was lofty and grand, with the two words heaven and earth carved on it. It seemed like it had been carved out with a sword, sharp and majestic. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.